Welcome to Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing. Let's begin.
Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 1A. Circumflex Rowan Hospital. The Kingdom of Valoria was home to more than 200 million people and over 300 major hospitals. Every year, thousands of medical students graduated from universities across the kingdom. Most dreamed of joining prestigious institutions such as Westbridge Medical Center, St. Victoria Hospital, or the Royal Medical Institute. Only a handful succeeded. The rest started somewhere lower, much lower. Rain fell steadily over Silvergate City as the train rolled through the South District. Among the passengers sat a young man wearing a simple black jacket and carrying a worn backpack. His name was Ethan Vale, 24 years old, newly graduated from North Valley Medical University, and today was the first day of his residency. Years of studying had left faint shadows beneath his dark eyes. He wasn't the smartest graduate in his class, nor the most talented. His grades were good enough to pass, good enough to graduate, but not good enough for elite hospitals. In medicine, effort mattered, but reputation mattered too, and North Valley was far from the most respected medical university in Valoria. Outside the train window, the skyline of Silvergate stretched into the distance. Near the city center stood the hospitals every medical student knew by name. Westbridge Medical Center, 23 floors, over 3,000 beds, 8 surgical departments. The dream destination of young surgeons across the kingdom. Unfortunately, Ethan's destination was somewhere else. 10 minutes later, the train stopped. A weathered building stood across the street. A sign above the entrance read, St. Rowan Community Hospital, established 1956. Ethan stared at it quietly. The hospital contained nearly 600 beds, 2 operating rooms, 11 departments, more than 800 employees, and despite its age, it remained one of the busiest hospitals in the South District. This would be his workplace, his battlefield, and perhaps the place where his future would be decided. Taking a deep breath, Ethan crossed the street and entered the hospital. Immediately, the noise hit him. Phones rang, monitors beeped, patients filled the waiting area. Doctors hurried through hallways carrying charts. A nurse pushed a stretcher toward the emergency department, while 2 residents followed behind discussing laboratory results. For a moment, Ethan simply stood there. This wasn't a classroom. This wasn't a simulation. This was real medicine, real patients, real responsibility, and somewhere deep inside the building, beyond the surgical department and operating rooms, fate was already preparing the event that would change his life forever. End of Chapter 1. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The Surgical Simulation System. Chapter 2A. Circumflex the Department of Surgery. The basement conference room was already crowded when Ethan arrived. Nearly 30 new residents sat in rows of chairs while department representatives introduced themselves one after another. For Ethan, however, only one department truly mattered. Surgery. Since entering medical school, he had always been fascinated by surgeons, not because of fame, not because of prestige, but because surgery was one of the few fields where knowledge and skill came together in the most direct way possible. A correct diagnosis could save a life. A successful operation could change one forever. Unfortunately, surgery was also considered one of the most difficult specialties in Valoria. Long hours, extreme pressure, constant competition, and one of the highest resignation rates among young doctors. The conference room door suddenly opened. A middle-aged doctor entered wearing dark blue scrubs. The room immediately became quieter. Dr. Graham. Several residents whispered his name. Ethan recognized him from the hospital website. Dr. William Graham, Chief of General Surgery, 48 years old, one of the most respected surgeons in St. Rowan. Behind him stood several other doctors, deputy chief surgeon, senior attendings, attending physicians, the leadership of the surgical department. Dr. Graham stood at the podium. Welcome to surgery. His voice was calm but carried authority. Some of you selected this department because you wanted a challenge. Nobody spoke. Some of you selected it because you watched medical dramas. A few residents looked embarrassed. Most of you have no idea what you're getting into. Several doctors behind him smiled. Clearly, they had heard this speech before. Dr. Graham clicked a remote. A hospital organizational chart appeared on the projector screen. This is the structure of St. Rowan's surgical division. The chart expanded. General surgery, trauma surgery, orthopedic surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, neurosurgery, plastic and reconstructive surgery, vascular surgery. Each department had its own chief, deputy chief, attending physicians, fellows, residents, and interns. For a moment, Ethan felt overwhelmed. Medical school had prepared him for medicine, not for the complexity of a real hospital. There are 22 operating rooms in this hospital, Dr. Graham continued. On average, over 80 procedures are performed every day. Several residents looked surprised. The number was larger than expected. Dr. Graham continued. You will not perform surgery anytime soon. The room became quiet. You will observe, you will learn, you will assist, and eventually, if you prove competent, you may earn the privilege of operating. No one looked disappointed, because everyone already knew. No resident walked into a hospital and immediately became a surgeon. Years of training came first. The presentation continued for nearly an hour. Ethan listened carefully. He learned about emergency appendectomies, gallbladder removal procedures, trauma surgery, hernia repairs, bowel resections, and dozens of other procedures he had only studied in textbooks. The deeper the presentation went, the more he realized how little he truly knew. Medical school taught foundations. Hospitals taught reality. After orientation ended, residents were assigned to departments. Ethan received his badge assignment. Department, General Surgery, Residency Year, 1, Supervisor, Dr. Leonard Reeves. The moment he read the final line, several nearby residents looked at him sympathetically. One even muttered, "Good luck." Ethan wasn't sure how to interpret that. The surgical department occupied the 4th and 5th floors of the hospital. As Ethan followed a nurse through the hallways, He finally saw where he would spend most of the next few years. The wards were crowded. Patients filled nearly every room. Family members waited anxiously outside. Doctors moved quickly between consultations. Nurses managed medication schedules. The entire floor felt like a living organism. Everyone depended on everyone else. Near the nurse's station stood a young man holding 3 coffees. Ethan blinked. 3 coffees. Again. The man noticed him immediately. You must be the new resident. Ethan Vale. Mason read. Ethan. Why do you look so nervous? Because it's my first day. There. Mason handed him a coffee. Trust me, you'll need this. Ethan accepted it. How long have you worked here? 6 months. Then you're practically a veteran. Mason laughed. No. He pointed toward a nearby attending physician. That's a veteran. Then toward another doctor. That's a veteran. Finally, he pointed toward an elderly nurse. That's basically a legend. Ethan couldn't help laughing. For the first time all morning, his tension eased slightly. Maybe surviving St. Rowan wouldn't be impossible. Later that afternoon, Ethan was assigned basic responsibilities. Patient charts, ward rounds, post-operative observations. Nothing glamorous. Nothing exciting, but important nonetheless. As he walked through the ward reviewing files, he noticed something. Every patient had a story. An elderly man recovering from bowel surgery. A teacher awaiting gallbladder removal. A construction worker injured on the job. Medicine wasn't just procedures, it was people. That realization stayed with him throughout the afternoon. As evening approached, Ethan finally sat alone in the resident lounge. The room was quiet. For the first time all day, he could relax. His body felt exhausted. His head hurt, and tomorrow would be even worse. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough to rest. Suddenly, the euros. A sharp pain exploded behind his eyes. Ethan jerked upright. The room spun. His heartbeat accelerated. A strange metallic voice echoed inside his head, a voice no one else seemed to hear. ***, compatible host detected. ***. Ethan froze. The voice continued. ***, evaluating medical knowledge. ***, evaluating surgical aptitude. ***, evaluation complete. A cold sensation ran through his body. Then darkness swallowed his vision, and a glowing blue screen slowly appeared before his eyes. End of Chapter 2. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 3A. Circumflex euros. System activation. The resident lounge disappeared. The walls, the desks, the fluorescent lights, everything dissolved into darkness. Ethan stood frozen. His heartbeat thundered inside his chest. What the hell is happening? No answer came. The darkness stretched endlessly in every direction. Then a cold mechanical voice echoed around him. ***, surgical simulation system successfully activated. Host confirmed. Identity verification complete. Ethan Vale. Age 24. Current position. P1 surgical resident. The darkness suddenly shattered. A massive blue screen appeared before him. Lines of information rapidly filled the air. Surgical simulation system. Host. Ethan Vale. Age 24. Medical University. North Valley Medical University. Hospital. St. Rowan Community Hospital. Department. General surgery. Current rank. Junior resident. Current medical evaluation. Medical knowledge. 58. Anatomy. 62. Clinical diagnosis. 51. Patient communication. 68. Surgical theory. 54. Surgical practical skill. 18. Emergency response. 37. Overall evaluation. 49 100. Ethan stared, then stared again. His face darkened. 49. The voice remained emotionless. ***, host currently below national resident average. Ethan nearly choked. Below average? ***, confirmed. That somehow hurt more than expected. Before he could complain further, another screen appeared. ***, current surgical skills. Hand tying. Beginner. Suturing. Beginner. Incision planning. Beginner. Wound closure. Beginner. Laparoscopic understanding. Beginner. Operating room protocol. Beginner. Warning. Host possesses theoretical knowledge but lacks practical experience. That's because I've never performed surgery. Correct. Then why are you insulting me? System only presents facts. Ethan suddenly wanted to argue with the machine. A new screen appeared. Primary function. Simulation training. Medical knowledge database. Procedure analysis. Skill evaluation. Career progression. Current simulation time available. 1 hour. Beginner reward package. Detected. Would host like to open reward? Yes or no? Ethan hesitated, then selected yes. Immediately, another notification appeared. Beginner reward obtained. Simulation hours plus 20. Basic suturing tutorial. Sterile technique tutorial. Operating room fundamentals. The blue screens faded. A large metal door appeared before him. Above it were glowing words. Surgical simulation center. The door slowly opened. Ethan stepped forward. His eyes widened. A fully equipped operating room stretched before him. Bright surgical lights. Monitoring equipment. Operating table. Sterile instruments. Everything looked real. Too real. A second later another screen appeared. Current tutorial. Basic Basic interrupted sutures. Difficulty. Beginner. Completion reward. Suturing experience plus 10. Simulation credits plus 5. Suddenly, a patient appeared on the operating table, not a real person. A simulation model. Its forearm contained a simple surgical wound. The voice returned. ***, begin tutorial. ***. For the next hour, Ethan experienced something strange. Every mistake was corrected immediately. Every incorrect hand position was identified. Every poor movement was analyzed. The system didn't magically teach him. It simply forced him to practice. Again, and again, and again. The first stitch failed. The second stitch looked terrible. The third was slightly better. By the 20th attempt, his fingers finally began moving naturally. For the first time, he understood something. Surgery wasn't just knowledge. It was muscle memory, precision, repetition. Thousands of small movements performed correctly. Medical school had taught him theory. The system was teaching him practice. Eventually the tutorial ended. A notification appeared. ***, tutorial complete ***, basic suturing experience plus 10. Skill improved. Suturing. Beginner A circumflex beginner advanced. ***, simulation time remaining ***, 19 hours. Ethan froze. 19 hours? The voice responded immediately. ***, 1 hour has passed within the simulation. ***, only 3 minutes have passed in reality. ***. Silence filled the room. Ethan slowly looked around, then at the timer, then at the operating table. His heartbeat accelerated. 3 minutes? He had trained for an hour, and only 3 minutes had passed outside? The implications were terrifying. A resident's biggest limitation was time. There was never enough of it. Too many patients. Too much studying. Too much competition. But if this system was telling the truth of Euros, he could train dozens of hours while everyone else slept. The possibility left him speechless. For the first time since entering St. Rowan Hospital, Ethan saw something he had never possessed before. A chance. Not talent. Not connections. Not family. Influence. A chance to catch up, and perhaps one day, surpass them all. Back in the real world, Ethan suddenly opened his eyes. The resident lounge remained exactly the same. Doctors walked past outside. Someone was making coffee. Nothing had changed, except him. A faint blue notification appeared before his eyes. ***, daily quest available. ***, observe 1 surgery. Reward. Simulation hours plus 2. Surgical knowledge experience plus 5. Ethan stared at the screen, then slowly smiled. Tomorrow would be interesting. End of chapter 3. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 4a, circumflex Euros, first steps forward. The next morning, Ethan arrived at St. Rowan Hospital nearly 40 minutes early, not because he wanted to, because he hadn't slept. After discovering the surgical simulation system, sleeping suddenly felt wasteful. The entire night had been spent inside the simulation center, practicing, failing, practicing again. When he finally left the simulation room, he had completed more than 200 sutures. Even now, the memory felt unreal. Before yesterday, Ethan had only practiced suturing during university training sessions. A few hours here, a few hours there, certainly not enough to build true confidence. Now things were different, very different. As he entered the surgical department, nurses were already changing shifts. Residents gathered around the central station. Attending physicians reviewed patient charts. The entire floor buzzed with activity. This was one thing Ethan quickly learned about hospitals. Work never stopped. Patients didn't care whether doctors were tired. Disease didn't care whether it was morning or midnight. Medicine moved forward regardless. "You're early." Ethan turned. Mason stood nearby carrying 2 coffees. This time only 2. Apparently, even he had limits. "Couldn't sleep," Ethan replied. Mason nodded knowingly. "First week." He handed Ethan a coffee. "Trust me, it gets worse." "That's not encouraging." "Nobody encouraged me either." Before Ethan could answer, another resident approached. The man's name badge read, Ryan Mercer, PY1 surgical resident. Unlike Ethan, Ryan looked perfectly prepared, perfectly rested, perfectly confident. The kind of person who probably finished exams early and somehow still scored highest. Rumors about Ryan had already spread through the department. Top graduate, elite medical school, outstanding practical evaluations. Several attendings had personally requested him. Compared to Ryan, Ethan felt painfully average. Ryan glanced toward Ethan. Vale. "Ethan." "I know." His expression remained neutral. "You're under Dr. Reeves too." Ethan nodded. Ryan sighed. "Good luck." Then he walked away. Ethan stared. "Why does everyone keep saying that?" Mason laughed. "You'll understand eventually." Morning rounds began at 7. For Ethan, this was his first real introduction to hospital life. A team of doctors moved from room to room reviewing patients. Leading them was an attending physician. Behind him came senior residents, then junior residents, then interns. The hierarchy was obvious and strict. Each patient discussion followed the same structure. Current condition, vital signs, laboratory results, treatment plan, possible complications. Every detail mattered. At first Ethan struggled to keep up. Information flew past rapidly. Medical terminology, medication adjustments, surgical planning, discharge discussions. His notebook filled with notes. Even then he felt behind. Medicine was vast, far larger than any textbook. By late morning, Ethan finally received his first assignment. A patient required wound dressing changes after surgery. Simple work, routine work, the kind of task given to junior residents. Still, Ethan approached it seriously. Inside the room sat an elderly man recovering from abdominal surgery. The operation had been performed 2 days earlier. Everything appeared stable. As Ethan prepared the dressing supplies, the patient smiled. "New doctor? Is it that obvious?" The old man laughed. "You're nervous." Fair point. Carefully following hospital protocol, Ethan began removing the old dressing. Everything looked normal. No signs of infection. No excessive bleeding. No concerning swelling. The wound appeared healthy. After completing the procedure, Ethan updated the chart and left. Simple, routine, successful. Yet as he walked away, a notification suddenly appeared before his eyes. Asterisk task completed. Asterisk. Perform basic postoperative assessment. Reward. Clinical observation +1. Simulation credit +5. Ethan nearly stopped walking. Nobody else seemed able to see it. The blue screen disappeared moments later. His heartbeat accelerated slightly. The system wasn't limited to simulations. It tracked real world performance too. Interesting. Very interesting. That afternoon, excitement spread throughout the department. An emergency appendectomy had been scheduled. For experienced surgeons, it was a common operation. For junior residents, however, it was an opportunity to learn. Appendicitis occurred when the appendix became inflamed. If untreated, it could rupture. A ruptured appendix could lead to severe infection throughout the abdomen, which was why surgery remained the preferred treatment. Ethan joined several residents outside operating room 7. Through the observation window, he could see preparations underway. Nurses arranged instruments. Anesthesia staff prepared medications. Monitors displayed vital signs. Every member of the team had a role. Every step followed protocol. A few minutes later, Dr. Rees entered. Conversation immediately stopped. The chief trauma surgeon reviewed the patient's chart. Then he looked toward the observation area. For a brief moment, his eyes met Ethan's. Only for a second. Then he returned his attention to the operation. The surgery began. The first incision was small, precise, controlled. Unlike television dramas, nobody shouted. Nobody panicked. The room remained calm, professional, focused. Watching from outside, Ethan realized something. The difference between a student and a surgeon wasn't knowledge. It was confidence. Confidence born from performing thousands of procedures, thousands of decisions, thousands of hours. And suddenly he understood the true value of the system. It wasn't making him a surgeon. It was giving him the opportunity to accumulate experience faster than anyone else. The realization sent a wave of excitement through him. For the first time, the distance between himself and the elite residents didn't feel impossible. Difficult? Absolutely. Impossible? Maybe not. As the operation continued, another notification quietly appeared. Asterisk daily quest completed. Asterisk observe 1 surgery. Reward. Simulation hours +2. Surgical knowledge +5. Asterisk current simulation hours. Asterisk 21. Ethan looked at the glowing numbers. Then toward the operating room. A small smile appeared on his face. Tonight he would train again. And tomorrow, he would be slightly better than he was today. For now, that was enough. End of Chapter 4. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. # the surgical simulation system. # Chapter 5a. Circumflex Euros 20. 1 hours. That night, Ethan returned to his apartment after nearly 13 hours at St. Rowan Hospital. His apartment wasn't large. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a worn sofa, a desk buried beneath old medical textbooks. It was the type of place most people would overlook. For Ethan, it was home. After heating a frozen meal and calling his father for a few minutes, he finally collapsed onto the sofa. His father spent most of the conversation bragging about him to neighbors. Apparently, half the neighborhood already believed Ethan was performing life-saving surgeries. The reality was far less impressive. Today he had changed dressings, filled paperwork, and observed an appendectomy. Still, hearing the pride in his father's voice made him smile. After ending the call, Ethan looked toward the ceiling. His body felt exhausted. His mind didn't. 21 simulation hours. The number remained stuck in his head. Slowly, he closed his eyes. Immediately, darkness swallowed him. The surgical simulation center appeared around him. Bright lights illuminated the operating room. Monitors beeped softly. Steel instruments rested neatly on surgical trays. Everything looked exactly as it had before. The blue system screen materialized. Welcome. Host. Current simulation hours. 21. Current level. Junior resident. Overall evaluation. 49 of 100. Ethan immediately selected skills. A new screen appeared. Medical knowledge. 58. Anatomy. 62. Clinical diagnosis. 51. Patient communication. 68. Surgical theory. 59. Practical surgical skill. 21. Emergency response. 37. His practical skill had increased. Not by much, but it had increased, which meant progress was possible. The system wasn't cheating. It wasn't making him a genius. It was allowing him to train. That made all the difference. A new notification appeared. Available beginner modules. Basic suturing. Operating room conduct. Sterile procedures. Wound closure. Patient assessment. Ethan selected. Operating room conduct. The world changed instantly. The operating room disappeared. A conference room appeared. Several virtual doctors stood around a table reviewing a patient file. At the front stood a surgeon. The system voice echoed. Tutorial. Operating room conduct. Objective. Learn preoperative procedures. Difficulty. Beginner. For the next 2 hours, Ethan learned something most television dramas completely ignored. Surgery began long before the first incision. Patient identification. Risk assessment. Medical history review. Anesthesia planning. Instrument verification. Infection prevention. Every step mattered. One mistake could lead to disaster. One overlooked detail could harm a patient. The deeper Ethan learned, the more he respected surgeons. The operation itself was only part of the process. The preparation was equally important. Hours passed. Then more hours. One simulation module became another. Patient assessment. Sterile preparation. Wound closure. Basic emergency protocols. By the time Ethan finally stopped, 12 simulation hours had passed. The results immediately appeared. Training summary. Operating room conduct completed. Patient assessment completed. Sterile procedures completed. Rewards. Surgical theory +4. Clinical diagnosis +2. Emergency response +3. Overall evaluation. 53 100. Ethan blinked. 53. He had crossed 50. Not a huge improvement. Yet for someone who had spent only a few real world hours training, it was incredible. The next morning arrived quickly. Ethan felt tired physically, but mentally, something had changed. During morning rounds, discussion seemed easier to follow. Medical terminology connected faster. Treatment plans made more sense. He wasn't smarter. He simply possessed more experience. Experience gained inside the simulation. Near noon, a commotion erupted inside the surgical ward. Several nurses rushed toward room 3. 117. An attending physician followed immediately. Ethan and several residents hurried after them. Inside the room, a patient had suddenly developed severe abdominal pain. Monitors showed abnormal readings. The patient's face had become pale. The attending physician quickly began asking questions. Recent symptoms, pain location, medical history, possible complications. Ethan stood near the back, observing carefully. Then something unexpected happened. A familiar blue screen appeared before his eyes. Case analysis available. Potential conditions. Postoperative bleeding, a circumflex euros 43%. Internal infection, a circumflex euros 28%. Intestinal obstruction, a circumflex euros 17%. Other causes, a circumflex euros 12%. Ethan froze. The system wasn't giving answers. It was providing possibilities, probabilities. The same way an experienced physician might think through a case. Interesting. Very interesting. The attending physician continued the assessment. Several tests were ordered immediately. Nearly 30 minutes later, results returned. Postoperative bleeding. Exactly the system's highest probability. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. The system wasn't simply a training tool. It could assist clinical reasoning as well, not replace it, support it. The difference was important. Dangerously important. As the situation stabilized, another notification appeared. Observation bonus. Successfully analyzed clinical case. Reward. Clinical diagnosis +1. Simulation hours +1. Current simulation hours 10. Ethan slowly looked toward the ward. Around him, doctors continued working. Nurses moved between rooms. Patients spoke with family members. Everything looked normal. Yet for Ethan, the world had changed completely, because for the first time, he could see a path forward. Not an easy path, not a shortcut. A path built through thousands of hours of training. One simulation at a time, and somewhere deep inside St. Rowan Hospital, opportunities were already approaching. Opportunities that would test whether Ethan truly deserved the advantages he had been given. End of Chapter 5. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 6A. Circumflex euros. First emergency. 3 days passed quickly. Ethan's routine became simple. Hospital, home, simulation, sleep, repeat. Every night he spent hours inside the surgical simulation system. Every morning he returned slightly stronger. Not dramatically stronger. Not enough for people to notice, but enough for him to feel the difference. His chart reviews became faster. His patient assessments improved. Medical discussions that once seemed confusing now felt more familiar. For the first time since arriving at St. Rowan, he felt like he was moving forward. The general surgery department remained as busy as ever. One morning, while reviewing patient records, Ethan finally learned more about the people around him. St. Rowan wasn't a massive hospital like Westbridge Medical Center, but it was large enough to have dozens of attending physicians and over 40 residents. General surgery alone had *1 department chief, *2 deputy chiefs, *14 attending surgeons, *8 senior residents, *16 junior residents. Competition existed everywhere. Some residents fought for operating room opportunities. Others wanted research projects. Everyone wanted recommendations for future promotions. Medicine wasn't only about patients. It was also about careers, something Ethan was slowly beginning to understand. Just before noon, the overhead speaker suddenly activated. From a team to emergency department. The announcement echoed throughout the hospital. Several doctors immediately stood. Nurses began moving quickly. The atmosphere changed in seconds. Ethan looked up. Nearby, Mason sighed dramatically. "There goes lunch." "What happened?" Ethan asked. From a call. Mason stood. "Usually means somebody had a very bad day." A few moments later, another announcement followed. Multi-vehicle collision. 4 incoming patients. The entire department became busier. Even residents not assigned to emergency medicine were being called for assistance. Ethan followed the crowd toward the emergency department. As they arrived, the ambulance doors were already opening. First patient was conscious. The second wasn't. The third had visible fractures. Fourth was covered in blood. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. Unlike television dramas, nobody panicked. Doctors immediately divided responsibilities. Airway assessment, breathing evaluation, circulation checks, trauma examination. Everyone knew their role. Everyone moved quickly. Near one trauma bed, an attending physician suddenly pointed toward Ethan. "You." Ethan froze. "Sir?" "Check blood pressure and prepare documentation." "Yes, sir." He immediately moved forward. Patient appeared to be a man in his 40s. Conscious, confused, bleeding from a deep wound on his arm. As Ethan worked, he remembered one of the trauma modules he had completed inside the simulation. First priority wasn't the wound. It was the patient's overall condition. Airway, breathing, circulation. The basics. Always the basics. The simulation had repeated that lesson dozens of times. Now he finally understood why. Several minutes later, a nurse arrived carrying additional supplies. The attending physician glanced toward Ethan. "What's your assessment?" The question caught him off guard. For a brief moment, the emergency department seemed strangely quiet. Everyone appeared to be waiting. Ethan quickly reviewed the information. Stable airway, stable breathing, controlled bleeding, no immediate signs of shock. Condition appears stable. Ethan replied carefully. Primary concern is blood loss from the arm injury. The attending physician nodded. Nothing more. Yet somehow Ethan felt relief. He hadn't embarrassed himself. A familiar blue notification appeared. Assessment correct. Clinical reasoning +1. Emergency response +1. Simulation hours +2. Ethan quickly looked away before anyone noticed. The system was helping again, not by providing answers, but by rewarding correct thinking. Several hours later, the emergency situation was finally under control. 2 patients required surgery. 1 was transferred to intensive care. The remaining patient would recover without major intervention. As doctors slowly returned to their departments, Mason collapsed into a chair beside Ethan. "Congratulations." "For what?" "You survived your first trauma activation." Ethan laughed. "I mostly filled paperwork. Trust me." Mason pointed toward the emergency room. "That's surviving." Later that evening, Ethan received unexpected news. A notice had been posted on the surgical department board. Residents gathered around it immediately. Some looked excited. Others looked nervous. Ethan moved closer. The title immediately caught his attention. First, your surgical resident evaluation. Date, 2 weeks from today. Participants, all PGI-1 surgical residents. Assessment categories, clinical knowledge, patient assessment, operating room protocol, basic technical skills. Ethan stared at the announcement. An evaluation. Already, around him, several residents began discussing rankings, scores, performance, recommendations. Apparently the results mattered. A lot. Top performers would receive better opportunities. Additional operating room observation, direct mentorship, research projects. The difference between first place and last place could influence an entire career. For the first time, Ethan understood why everyone looked so serious. This wasn't just a test. It was the first competition. And suddenly, those extra simulation hours seemed far more valuable. As the other residents slowly walked away, Ethan remained standing before the notice board, his eyes focused on the evaluation date. 2 weeks, 14 days, more than 300 possible simulation hours. A small smile appeared on his face. For everyone else, preparation would begin tomorrow. For Ethan, it had already begun. End of Chapter 6. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. # the surgical simulation system. # Chapter 7 A circumflex euros. The first ranking. The resident evaluation announcement spread through St. Rowan Hospital faster than Ethan expected. For senior doctors, it was routine. For first-year residents, it felt like a battlefield declaration. Every conversation eventually returned to the same topic. Scores, rankings, opportunities, and careers. Within a single day, Ethan discovered that the evaluation wasn't merely an exam. It was the first official ranking of the year. The ranking would be posted publicly inside the surgical department. Every resident would see it. Every attending physician would see it. Every department chief would see it. Nobody wanted to finish at the bottom, especially not in surgery. The next morning, the resident lounge was unusually crowded. Normally, most residents rushed directly to work. Today was different. Groups have formed around tables discussing preparation strategies, review schedules, practice sessions, study materials. Near the coffee machine, Ethan overheard 2 residents talking. Ryan's definitely taking first place. Obviously. Who do you think gets second? The second resident shrugged. Does it matter? Nobody's catching Ryan. Ethan continued walking. This wasn't the first time he had heard Ryan Mercer's name. The man had become something of a legend among first-year residents. Top graduate, elite university, outstanding practical examinations. Even several attendings openly praised him. Compared to Ryan, most residents looked ordinary, including Ethan. Morning rounds ended shortly before noon. As Ethan updated patient charts, a shadow appeared beside his desk. He looked up. Ryan Mercer, famous resident himself. What are your evaluation goals? Ryan asked. Ethan blinked. The question seemed random. I haven't really thought about rankings. Ryan stared. You should. Then he sat down. For the first time, Ethan noticed how serious the other resident appeared. Not arrogant, not unfriendly, simply focused. The first evaluation matters. Ryan pointed toward the surgical department. Department chiefs remember names. Attendings remember names. Mentors remember names. His voice remained calm. The people at the top receive opportunities. For a moment, Ethan understood. Ryan wasn't obsessed with rankings because of pride. He viewed them as stepping stones, part of the journey. Nothing more. Before leaving, Ryan paused. What rank are you aiming for? Ethan thought carefully, then answered honestly. Not last. Ryan stared, then unexpectedly laughed. The first genuine laugh Ethan had seen from him. Fair enough. Then he walked away. That evening, Ethan returned home earlier than usual. Not because work had become easier, because he had a plan. The evaluation consisted of 4 categories: clinical knowledge, patient assessment, operating room protocol, technical skills. The system could help with all 4. After dinner, Ethan entered the simulation world. A familiar operating room appeared instantly. Blue screens illuminated the room. Current evaluation: medical knowledge, 58, anatomy, 62, clinical diagnosis, 54, patient communication, 68, surgical theory, 63, practical surgical skill, 25, emergency response, 41, overall evaluation, 53. Still far from impressive, but better than before. A new notification appeared. Special evaluation preparation program available. Unlock. Yes. Ethan immediately selected yes. The operating room vanished. A new environment appeared. This time it resembled an examination center. Rows of desks, patient charts, diagnostic images, clinical scenarios. The system voice echoed. Resident evaluation module activated. Difficulty. 1. Objective. Prepare host for surgical assessment. For the next several hours, Ethan completed case after case. A patient with abdominal pain. A patient with appendicitis. A patient with intestinal obstruction. A patient recovering from surgery. Each scenario required diagnosis, treatment planning, risk assessment, and every mistake resulted in immediate feedback. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed. The failures frustrated him, but they also taught him more than success ever could. After nearly 8 simulation hours, the training finally ended. A summary appeared. Training complete. Clinical diagnosis +2. Surgical theory +1. Patient assessment +2. Simulation hours used 8. Current overall evaluation 56. Ethan exhaled slowly. Progress. Slow, steady, real. Exactly what he wanted. The next morning brought an unexpected opportunity. During ward rounds, Dr. Graham himself appeared. The chief of general surgery rarely visited routine resident rounds. His arrival immediately attracted attention. Several attendings straightened. Residents became noticeably more nervous. Dr. Graham reviewed several patient cases, asked difficult questions, corrected mistakes, then stopped beside a patient's bed, an elderly woman recovering from abdominal surgery. He looked toward the group. Possible postoperative complications? Silence. Several residents avoided eye contact. Nobody wanted to answer incorrectly. Finally, Doctor. Graham pointed. Vale. Ethan froze. Every resident immediately turned toward him. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Fortunately, he recognized the scenario. One nearly identical to a simulation case from the previous night. He carefully listed several possibilities. Infection, bleeding, intestinal obstruction, pulmonary complications. As he spoke, Doctor. Graham listened silently. When Ethan finished, the chief surgeon nodded once. Acceptable. Just one word. Acceptable. Yet somehow it felt like receiving an award, because Ethan noticed something important. Several residents looked surprised. Even Ryan seemed slightly impressed. For the first time since arriving at St. Rowan Hospital, Ethan wasn't simply another new resident. People had begun noticing him, and the evaluation hadn't even started yet. That night, as Ethan entered the simulation center once again, a new notification appeared. Achievement unlocked. First recognition by Department Chief. Reward. Simulation hours +5. Confidence bonus activated. Current simulation hours 28. Ethan smiled. Competition had only begun, and for the first time, he believed he might actually have a chance. End of Chapter 7. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. # the surgical simulation system. # Chapter 8A. Circumflex Euros, the skills lab. Only 10 days remained before the first resident evaluation. The atmosphere inside the surgical department had changed noticeably. Conversations became shorter. Residents spent more time studying. Even the usually relaxed Mason seemed busier than normal. The closer the evaluation approached, the more everyone realized the same thing. This wasn't just a test. It was the first official ranking of their careers, and nobody wanted to start at the bottom. 2 days later, a notice appeared on the department board. **P1 Technical Skills Assessment **. Location. Surgical Skills Laboratory. Attendance. Mandatory. The notice immediately attracted attention. Unlike written examinations, technical assessments measured actual performance, how residents handled instruments, how they tied surgical knots, how they sutured wounds, how they maintained sterile technique. These skills couldn't be memorized from a textbook. They required practice. Lots of practice. That afternoon, Ethan finally visited the surgical skills laboratory. The room occupied nearly half a floor. Practice stations filled the space. Artificial skin models, suturing pads, laparoscopic simulators, training equipment. Several residents were already practicing. Among them was Ryan Mercer. Without saying a word, Ryan continued tying surgical knots with impressive speed. Each movement appeared smooth, natural, efficient. Years of preparation were obvious. Nearby, another resident whispered. That's unfair. What is? Ryan worked as a surgical assistant before medical school. Several people groaned. Apparently the competition had become even harder. Ethan moved toward an empty station. A simple wound model rested on the table. Beside it lay basic surgical instruments. Needle holder, forceps, scissors, suture material, nothing complicated. Yet when Ethan picked them up, he immediately noticed something. His hands felt steadier. The movements felt more familiar. Countless simulation hours were beginning to show results. Not dramatically, but enough to matter. A few minutes later, a senior resident entered the room. Her name was Clara Bennett, fourth-year surgical resident, one of the highest-ranked residents in the hospital. The room quickly became quieter. Clara crossed her arms. Let's see what we're working with. No one looked excited. Senior residents had a reputation. They enjoyed pointing out mistakes. A lot. One by one, residents demonstrated basic techniques. Some performed well. Others struggled. Several received immediate criticism. Finally, Clara stopped beside Ethan. Your turn. A practice wound lay before him. Simple interrupted sutures. Basic technique. The foundation of surgical closure. Ethan took a breath. Then began. Needle placement. Entry angle. Tissue handling. Knot tying. Everything flowed naturally. Not perfectly, but smoothly. For a moment, even he felt surprised. Simulation training was working. Really working. After several minutes, Clara inspected the result. The room remained silent. Several nearby residents watched carefully. Finally, Clara nodded. Not bad. A few people looked shocked. Apparently, compliments were rare. Your spacing is acceptable. She pointed toward one section. Your tension control still needs work. Then she moved on. That was it. Yet Ethan couldn't hide a small smile. For the first time since arriving at St. Rowan, his practical skills had received positive feedback. From an actual senior resident. Not a simulation. Not a system screen. A real surgeon. That evening, Ethan entered the simulation center immediately after returning home. The familiar blue interface appeared. Current evaluation. Medical knowledge. 59. Anatomy. 62. Clinical diagnosis. 57. Patient communication. 68. Surgical theory. 64. Practical surgical skill. 31. Emergency response. 41. Overall evaluation. 58. A new notification appeared. New module unlocked. Basic surgical knot mastery. Difficulty. Intermediate. Recommended skill. Practical surgical skill 30+. Reward. Skill advancement. Ethan selected the module without hesitation. The operating room vanished. A new training environment appeared. Hundreds of practice stations stretched into the distance. Each contained different surgical scenarios, different wound types, different tissue conditions, different complications. The voice echoed through the simulation center. Objective. Master fundamental knot tying techniques. Estimated completion time. 15. Simulation hours. Ethan immediately got to work. Hours passed. Mistakes happened. Corrections followed. Again, and again, and again. The system never became frustrated, never became tired, never stopped demanding precision. Every knot had to be perfect. Every movement had to be efficient. Every mistake carried consequences. By the end of the session, Ethan's fingers felt numb. Even though the training wasn't physically real, mentally the exhaustion remained. The reward screen finally appeared. Module complete. Practical surgical skill +3. Hand tying skill improved. Basic knot mastery acquired. Overall evaluation. 60. Ethan stared at the number. 60. For the first time since activating the system. He had crossed 60, still average compared to elite residents, but no longer below average. Progress. Real progress. The following morning brought unexpected news. The first resident evaluation would not begin with written examinations, nor technical assessments. Instead, the hospital administration had decided to start with something else. A live patient assessment challenge. Each resident would be assigned a real patient, then evaluated by attending physicians. Diagnosis, communication, clinical reasoning, treatment planning. Everything would be judged. The announcement immediately created tension throughout the department. Real patients meant real pressure, and mistakes would be remembered. As residents discussed the challenge, Ethan quietly looked toward the hospital wards. His heart beat slightly faster. Competition had finally begun, and unlike simulation patients, these ones were real. End of Chapter 8. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 9a. Circumflex Euros. The first evaluation. The first resident evaluation officially began on Monday morning. By 6 o'clock, the general surgery department was already crowded. Normally, residents would be focused on patients and ward rounds. Today was different. Everyone was focused on each other. Competition had officially arrived. A large notice board had been placed outside the conference room. Residents gathered around it immediately. Each participant had been assigned a patient. The task seemed simple. Conduct a complete assessment. Identify current problems. Recommend treatment plans. Present findings to attending physicians. Simple in theory, stressful in reality, because every answer would be scored. Every mistake would be noticed, and every ranking would eventually become public. Ethan found his name near the middle of the list. ***, Ethan Vale ***. Patient assignment. Room 4, 121, postoperative general surgery ward. Evaluation time, 9:30 a.m. Supervising physicians. Dr. Henry Collins. Dr. Rebecca Moore. 2 attending physicians. That wasn't ideal. More evaluators meant more opportunities to lose points. Still, there was nothing he could do about it. Nearby Mason appeared Carrie. In coffee as usual. Excited? No. Nervous? Very. Good. Ethan frowned. How is that good? Mason grinned. If you're nervous, it means you care. Before Ethan could respond, the emergency resident disappeared toward another department. Apparently, even evaluation days couldn't stop hospital work. At 8 o'clock, residents began meeting their assigned patients. Ethan walked into room 4. 121 carrying a clipboard. Inside sat a woman in her late 50s, recovering from gallbladder surgery, a relatively common procedure. The operation removed the gallbladder after repeated inflammation and painful gallstones. According to her chart, the surgery had gone well. No major complications, no signs of infection. Everything appeared normal. Still, appearances could be deceptive. Ethan introduced himself. Good morning, Mrs. Carter. The woman smiled. You must be another doctor. Resident. Same thing to me. That response made him laugh. The tension eased slightly. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan conducted a complete assessment. Pain level, mobility, appetite, sleep quality, medication effects, possible complications. Everything needed documentation. Everything mattered. The system remained silent throughout the process, which Ethan actually preferred. This was an evaluation. He wanted to rely on his own ability first. After completing the interview, he performed a basic physical examination. Vital signs remained stable. No significant abdominal tenderness. No fever. No concerning symptoms. Overall recovery looked excellent. As Ethan reviewed the information, a familiar blue screen finally appeared. Case review available. Assessment accuracy, 92%. Potential oversight. Monitor for early post-operative infection. Risk level, low. Ethan quickly glanced at the notification. Interesting. The system wasn't giving answers. It was highlighting details he might have missed. A subtle difference, but an important one. At 9:30, evaluation presentations began. One resident after another entered the conference room. Some emerged looking confident. Others looked devastated. Apparently the attending physicians weren't being gentle. Finally, Ethan's turn arrived. He entered the room. 2 attendings sat at a table reviewing paperwork. Several senior residents observed from the back, including Clara Bennett. Great. More witnesses. Exactly what he needed. Dr. Collins adjusted his glasses. Begin. Ethan took a breath, then started presenting. Patient history, surgical details, current condition, recovery progress, potential risks, treatment recommendations. Everything flowed smoothly. The simulations had helped more than he expected, not because they provided answers, because they had exposed him to similar situations repeatedly. By the time he finished, both attendings appeared satisfied. Then the questioning began. What are the most common complications following this procedure? How would you identify an early infection? What laboratory findings would concern you? What discharge instructions would you provide? The questions came rapidly, one after another, yet Ethan answered each calmly, not perfectly, but competently. When the final question ended, silence filled the room. Dr. Collins looked toward Dr. Moore. Both exchanged brief glances, then nodded. Good. Only one word. Yet Ethan immediately relaxed. He hadn't embarrassed himself. That alone felt like a victory. Outside the conference room, Ryan Mercer waited for his own evaluation. How'd it go? Ryan asked. Survived. Ryan nodded. That's usually enough. Then he disappeared inside. The remainder of the day passed quickly. Evaluations continued. Patients were assessed. Scores were recorded. Residents compared experiences. And everywhere Ethan went, one topic dominated every conversation. The rankings. That evening after returning home, Ethan entered the simulation center. A new notification appeared immediately. Evaluation event completed. Performance rating. Excellent. Rewards. Clinical diagnosis +2. Patient communication +1. Simulation hours +5. Current evaluation. 63. Ethan smiled. 60. Free. Not incredible. Not elite. But improving, slowly, steadily, exactly as planned. Then another notification appeared. This one was different, much larger. Special challenge available. Emergency surgical assessment. Difficulty, advanced. Reward, new system function. Failure penalty, none. Accept, yes or no. Ethan stared at the screen. A new system function? That was definitely unusual. Without hesitation, he selected yes. The simulation world suddenly began changing. The operating room appeared. Emergency alarms echoed. Doctors rushed through hallways. A trauma patient arrived covered in blood. The atmosphere felt completely different from anything he had experienced before. A system voice spoke. Welcome to emergency trauma simulation. Prepare for your first surgical emergency. Ethan's expression slowly became serious, because for the first time since obtaining the system, the training no longer felt routine. It felt dangerous. End of Chapter 9. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 10a. Circumflex Euro's emergency trauma simulation. The moment Ethan accepted the challenge, the world around him transformed. The familiar training room disappeared. The calm operating room vanished. In its place appeared chaos. Sirens echoed. Doctors shouted orders. Nurses rushed through crowded hallways. A trauma center stood before him, far larger than anything in Sidson. Rowan Hospital. Above the entrance hung a sign. *** Valoria National Trauma Institute ***. Ethan immediately understood. This wasn't a beginner tutorial. This was something completely different. A notification appeared. Emergency trauma assessment. Level. Advanced. Host position. First year surgical resident. Objective. Assist in patient survival. Failure conditions. Critical medical errors. Patient death. Ethan frowned. Patient death? Previous simulations simply ended when mistakes occurred. This one seemed much more serious. Before he could think further, alarm sounded. A trauma bay door burst open. Paramedics rushed inside pushing a stretcher. The patient was a young man, mid-20s. Multiple injuries. Severe bleeding. Low blood pressure. Unstable condition. The atmosphere instantly became tense. A virtual attending physician appeared beside Ethan. Resident. Ethan looked up. Assessment. The command came immediately. No time to think. No time to hesitate. Exactly like a real emergency. Ethan approached the patient. Airway. Breathing. Circulation. The trauma assessment sequence he had practiced countless times. For several seconds he focused entirely on the patient. Rapid breathing. Weak pulse. Visible abdominal trauma. Significant blood loss. Something was seriously wrong. A blue screen appeared. Patient status. Blood pressure. 82/54. Heart rate. 138. Oxygen saturation. 89%. Probability of internal bleeding. 76%. Ethan's expression changed. Internal bleeding. That explained the unstable condition. If untreated, the patient could die. Possible abdominal hemorrhage, Ethan said. The attending immediately nodded. Good. The patient was rushed toward an operating room, and to Ethan's surprise Euros. He was forced to follow. The simulation skipped forward. Suddenly he stood inside surgery. Bright lights illuminated the operating table. Monitors displayed unstable vital signs. Doctors worked rapidly. The situation looked far more intense than anything he had experienced before. This wasn't a routine procedure. This was damage control surgery, the type performed when patients were close to death. The attending pointed toward a monitor. Blood pressure dropping. Another surgeon spoke. We're losing time. A nurse called out. Additional blood units ready. Everyone moved quickly, efficiently, without panic. Yet the pressure was obvious. For the next several hours, Ethan observed every detail. Hemorrhage control, fluid resuscitation, trauma management, emergency decision making. Many concepts were beyond his current ability. Yet he absorbed everything. Every instruction, every technique, every decision. The simulation forced him to participate, to think, to analyze, not simply watch. Then, a mistake happened. His mistake. The attending suddenly questioned him. What complication are we most concerned about right now? Ethan answered too quickly. Shock. The answer wasn't completely wrong, but it wasn't specific enough. The system immediately reacted. Critical error. Incomplete assessment. Patient condition worsening. The patient's monitor alarmed. Blood pressure dropped further. Chaos intensified. Doctors responded immediately, trying to recover the situation. Yet the simulation didn't stop. It forced Ethan to watch the consequences. 5 minutes later, the screen turned red. Simulation failed. Cause. Delayed recognition of hemorrhagic shock. Patient outcome. Fatal. Silence. The operating room vanished. Darkness surrounded him. Ethan stood motionless. The failure hit harder than expected. He knew the patient wasn't real. He knew it was only training. Yet watching someone die because of his mistake felt terrible. The system voice appeared. Emergency medicine principle. Knowledge alone is insufficient. Correct timing saves lives. For a long moment, Ethan remained silent. Then he took a deep breath. Restart. The simulation restarted. The same patient arrived. The same injuries. The same emergency. Only this time Ethan knew what to expect. Again, and again, and again. The patient died. 5 times. 7 times. 10 times. Each failure taught something new. A missed symptom. A delayed response. An incorrect priority. Small mistakes became major consequences. Hours passed. Then more hours. Eventually, Ethan stopped counting. The simulation became his entire world. Failure, learning, improvement, repeat. Finally, during his 14th attempt, something changed. He recognized the warning signs earlier, communicated faster, made better decisions. The trauma team stabilized the patient. The surgery succeeded. The monitor alarm stopped. The patient survived. A notification appeared. Challenge complete. Emergency trauma assessment passed. Rewards. Emergency response +5. Clinical diagnosis +3. Surgical theory +2. Simulation hours +8. New function unlocked. Case replay system. Ethan blinked. Case replay? The explanation appeared immediately. Case replay system. Review previous cases. Analyze mistakes. Observe expert solutions. Accelerate learning. Ethan's eyes widened. This was enormous. Learning from mistakes was important. Being able to replay mistakes repeatedly was even better. When he finally left the simulation, sunlight was already entering his apartment. Nearly 12 simulation hours had passed. In reality, less than an hour. Rowan Hospital later that morning. Ethan walked through the surgical ward feeling strangely exhausted, yet also energized, because for the first time since obtaining the system, he understood its greatest strength. Not talent, not shortcuts, not miracles. Experience. The ability to experience failure repeatedly without harming a real patient. For a young doctor, that advantage was priceless. As Ethan entered the resident lounge, he noticed several residents gathered around a notice board. Excited voices filled the room. Someone had posted the preliminary scores from the first evaluation round, and for the first Timmy Euros, the rankings were finally becoming visible. End of Chapter 10. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 11. Circumflex Euros. The rankings. The resident lounge was unusually crowded. Normally, doctors came and went without paying much attention to one another. Today was different. Nobody cared about coffee. Nobody cared about breakfast. Everyone was staring at the ranking board. The first evaluation results had been posted for first-year residents. This was the first official ranking of their careers, and everyone wanted to know where they stood. Ethan slowly approached the board. A crowd had already gathered around it. Several residents looked pleased. Others looked disappointed. A few looked absolutely devastated. Apparently, the rankings were not being kind. The list contained 26 names. Every first-year surgical resident in the department. At the very top stood a familiar name. **1. Ryan Mercer **. Total score 94. No surprises there. Several residents had predicted exactly that outcome. Ryan had dominated medical school. Now he was dominating residency. The man seemed incapable of performing poorly. Further down the list, Ethan searched for his own name. His heartbeat increased slightly, not because he expected first place, because he hoped he wasn't near the bottom. Then he found it. Ethan Vale **. Total score 82. For several seconds, he simply stared. 8th out of 26. Much better than expected. Far better than expected. A familiar voice spoke behind him. Not bad. Ethan turned. Ryan stood nearby holding a patient file. The top-ranked resident glanced toward the board. 8th place for someone from North Valley is impressive. Most people would have considered that an insult. Oddly enough, Ryan sounded sincere. Ethan smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Then Ryan walked away. Nearby, another resident looked furious. A man named Jacob Turner, ranked 19th. Jacob came from one of Silvergate's elite universities. Most people expected him to finish near the top. Instead, he found himself buried in the middle rankings. His expression suggested he wasn't handling it well. By mid-morning, the entire department had heard the results. Even attendings were discussing them, not publicly, but enough for residents to notice. Performance mattered, especially in surgery. During lunch, Ethan found himself sitting with Mason and several other residents. The conversation naturally shifted toward the rankings. Top 10 is solid, Mason said. Ethan nodded. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse. Mason pointed toward a resident staring sadly into a sandwich. That guy dropped from first in his medical school class to 23rd. Everyone looked. The resident noticed, and immediately looked even sadder. For a few moments, laughter filled the table. It was one of the rare moments when residency felt normal. Not a competition, not a battlefield, just exhausted young doctors trying to survive. The pleasant atmosphere ended when Dr. Reeves entered the cafeteria. Silence immediately followed. Even Mason stopped talking. That alone was impressive. The trauma chief scanned the room. His eyes eventually stopped on Ethan. Vale. Ethan stood immediately. Sir, conference room 3. Then Reeves left. Just like that. No explanation. No details. Nothing. The table remained silent. Mason slowly looked up. What did you do? I don't know. That's somehow worse. 10 minutes later, Ethan entered conference room 3. Only 2 people were present. Dr. Reeves and Dr. Graham, the chief of general surgery. Suddenly, Ethan became nervous. Very nervous. Dr. Graham reviewed several documents before looking up. Your evaluation performance was satisfactory. Satisfactory. Not outstanding. Not exceptional. Satisfactory. The word sounded strangely intimidating. Dr. Reeves placed another file onto the table. A patient. Ethan looked confused. A patient? Dr. Graham nodded. One of our attendings will supervise. Your responsibility is assessment, monitoring, and reporting. For a moment, Ethan wasn't sure he understood. Residents usually assisted, observed, learned. They weren't often given primary responsibility for a patient, even under supervision. Dr. Graham continued. Temporary assignment. Consider it additional training. Ethan immediately understood. This wasn't a reward. It was a test. Another evaluation. Just unofficial this time. After leaving the conference room, he finally opened the file. Patient name, Harold Benson. Age, 63. Diagnosis, complicated diverticulitis. Scheduled surgery, 3 days. Ethan frowned. This wasn't a routine patient. Complicated diverticulitis involved inflammation and infection within the large intestine. Cases often required careful monitoring. Sometimes surgery, sometimes emergency intervention. Complications could become serious. Very serious. As Ethan reviewed the chart, a notification suddenly appeared. Special assignment received. Patient management trial. Objective, successfully monitor assigned patient. Reward, department reputation. Simulation hours. Potential meant or evaluation. That immediately caught his attention. For the first time since arriving at St. Rowan Hospital, Ethan felt something changing. The rankings had given him visibility. Now opportunities were appearing. Small opportunities, but opportunities nonetheless. That evening after returning home, Ethan entered the simulation center. A new module had already appeared. Patient management simulation. Complicated diverticulitis. Difficulty, intermediate. Estimated training time, 12 hours. Ethan stared at the screen, then smiled. 3 days until surgery. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to learn everything possible. Because somewhere inside St. Rowan Hospital, a 63-year-old patient was depending on doctors to make the right decisions, and Ethan intended to be ready. End of Chapter 11. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 12. circumflex euros. Harold Benson. For the first time since arriving at St. Rowan Hospital, Ethan had a patient assigned to him, not entirely his patient of course. An attending physician remained responsible for all major decisions, yet the assignment still felt different, more personal, more important, more real. As Ethan walked through the surgical ward the following morning, he found himself reviewing Harold Benson's chart for what felt like the 10th time. Age 63, retired mechanic, complicated diverticulitis, scheduled surgery in 3 days, history of hypertension, former smoker, no known drug allergies. Nothing looked particularly unusual, which somehow made Ethan more nervous. Medicine had taught him a simple lesson. The most dangerous situations often look normal at first. Room 438 sat near the end of the hallway. Ethan knocked gently before entering. An older man sat near the window reading a newspaper. Gray hair, broad shoulders, the weathered hands of someone who had spent decades doing physical labor. The man looked up. "You must be the young doctor." Ethan smiled. "Resident, doctor." Harold folded the newspaper. "Everyone keeps saying resident. My daughter doesn't care." Ethan laughed. Apparently patients had their own way of viewing hospital hierarchies. The conversation quickly became easier than expected. Harold possessed the personality of someone who could talk to anyone. Within 10 minutes, Ethan had learned more than the chart contained. Harold had spent 5 years repairing industrial machinery. His wife had passed away several years earlier. His daughter lived in Silvergate, and despite requiring surgery, he seemed strangely calm. Almost too calm. "Aren't you nervous?" Ethan asked. Harold shrugged. "A little." Then he smiled. "But worrying doesn't change anything." The answer surprised him. Most patients became anxious before surgery. Some became terrified. Harold simply accepted it. The attitude felt admirable. Over the next 2 days, Ethan visited repeatedly, monitoring symptoms, reviewing laboratory results, checking vital signs, discussing recovery plans. The work itself wasn't complicated, yet every interaction taught him something. Medicine wasn't only procedures and diagnoses. It was trust. Patients trusted doctors with information they wouldn't tell anyone else. They trusted strangers with their lives. The responsibility felt enormous. That evening, Ethan entered the simulation center. The patient management module immediately activated. A virtual version of Harold Benson appeared. Not identical, but close enough. For 12 simulation hours, Ethan managed different scenarios. Unexpected infections, medication reactions, blood pressure complications, delayed surgery, emergency deterioration. Again and again the system tested him. Again and again he made mistakes, and learned from them. One scenario ended particularly badly. The virtual patient developed a bowel perforation. Ethan failed to recognize the warning signs quickly enough. The result was catastrophic. The simulation declared the patient dead. The words remained on the screen for several seconds, long enough to leave an impression, long enough to remind him why preparation mattered. When training finally ended, the results appeared. ***, patient management skill increased ***, clinical diagnosis plus 2 ***, patient communication plus 1 ***, simulation hours remaining 18 ***. The next morning arrived quickly. Surgery day. As Ethan entered St. Rowan Hospital, he immediately sensed the difference. Today wasn't about evaluations. Today wasn't about rankings. Today wasn't about competition. Today was about a patient, a real patient. And for the first time since becoming a resident, Ethan felt the weight of that responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. Somewhere upstairs, Harold Benson was preparing for surgery, and Ethan intended to be ready. End of Chapter 12. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. # the surgical simulation system. # Chapter 13a. Circumflex euros, surgery day. Ethan arrived at St. Rowan Hospital before sunrise. The city outside was still dark, but the hospital was already awake. Nurses changed shifts, residents reviewed patient charts, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the hallways. For most people, it was just another morning. For Harold Benson, it was surgery day. As Ethan stepped into the surgical ward, he immediately checked the patient board. Harold's name remained at the top of the schedule. Procedure time: 8:00 a.m. Operating room 12. Lead surgeon, Dr. William Graham. Assistant surgeon, Dr. Laura Pierce. Assigned resident observer, Ethan Vale. A small smile appeared on Ethan's face. Observer. It wasn't much, but it was another opportunity. Another chance to learn. Another step forward. At 7 o'clock, Ethan entered Harold's room. The older man was already awake. A television played quietly in the background while a nurse completed final preparations. Harold looked surprisingly relaxed. "Morning, Doc." Ethan laughed. "Good morning. You look more nervous than I do." "That's because you're not the one being evaluated." Harold smiled. Fair point. For a few minutes they spoke casually. Nothing serious. Nothing medical. Just conversation. Baseball. Weather. Silvergate traffic. Normal topics. Perhaps that was why Ethan enjoyed speaking with patients like Harold. They reminded him that patients weren't diagnoses. They weren't procedures. They were people. Shortly before 8 o'clock, the transport team arrived. The room suddenly became quieter. Even Harold seemed slightly more serious. The reality of surgery had finally arrived. As nurses prepared to move the bed, Harold looked toward Ethan. "See you afterward." "You will." The answer came naturally, confidently. Ethan hoped it was true. The operating room complex occupied an entire section of the 4th floor. 2 operating rooms, hundreds of procedures every week, thousands every year. To Ethan it felt like the heart of a hospital, a place where preparation became action, where decisions truly mattered. After changing into surgical scrubs and completing the required protocols, he entered observation room 12. Large windows overlooked the operating area. Several residents were already present. Most stood quietly, watching, waiting, learning. At exactly 8 o'clock, the procedure began. Dr. Graham entered first. The chief surgeon moved with calm confidence. No wasted movement, no unnecessary conversation. Years of experience were visible in everything he did. Beside him stood Dr. Laura Pierce, one of the department's attending surgeons. Together, they reviewed the patient's information one final time. Patient identity, procedure confirmation, risk assessment, all standard protocol. Yet Ethan noticed how seriously everyone treated it. Even routine steps received full attention. human. Mistakes often began when people became careless. As surgery started, Ethan focused completely. This wasn't emergency trauma. This wasn't chaos. This was controlled surgery. Every action followed a plan. Every movement had a purpose. The lead surgeon explained key decisions to the residents observing from above. Why a particular approach was chosen. Why certain structures needed protection. Why patience sometimes mattered more than speed. For Ethan, it felt like a masterclass. He took notes constantly, not because anyone required it, because he didn't want to forget anything. Several times, the system quietly activated. Small blue notifications appeared. Procedure observed successfully. Surgical theory +1. Anatomical recognition improved. Anatomy +1. Clinical understanding increased. Surgical knowledge +1. Unlike before, Ethan barely noticed them. His attention remained fixed on the operating room. For nearly 2 hours, he watched some of the best surgeons in St. Rowan work. Not superheroes. Not miracle workers. Professionals. Highly trained professionals doing difficult work extremely well. And somehow that inspired him even more. The procedure ended successfully. No complications. No unexpected problems. Just good surgery. As the team began closing the incision, Ethan felt a strange sense of satisfaction, not because he had accomplished anything personally, because he had witnessed excellence, and now he understood exactly how far he still needed to climb. After surgery, Harold was transferred to recovery. Several hours later, Ethan visited him again. The older man looked exhausted, but stable, which was the important part. "You made it." Harold opened one eye, barely. His voice sounded weak, yet the joke remained. Ethan laughed. The tension he had carried all day finally eased. "That afternoon, Doctor." Graham unexpectedly stopped him in the hallway. The chief surgeon rarely spoke unless necessary, which immediately made Ethan nervous. "You observed carefully today." Ethan straightened. "Thank you, sir." "Doctor." Graham studied him for a moment. Most residents watched the surgery. The older surgeon paused. "You watched the decisions." Before Ethan could respond, "Doctor," Graham continued walking. The conversation lasted less than 10 seconds, yet Ethan remained standing in the hallway long afterward. Because he understood something important. The chief surgeon had noticed him, not his ranking, not his scores. Him, and inside a hospital filled with talented residents, that mattered a lot. That evening, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system once more. A new notification immediately appeared. Major milestone achieved. Observed first full surgical procedure. Bonus rewards granted. Surgical theory +3. Anatomy +2. Simulation hours +10. New training module available. Postoperative care management. Difficulty intermediate. Ethan stared at the notification, then smiled. Another module, another challenge, another opportunity to improve. Outside the simulation, he was still an ordinary first-year resident, one ranked 8th in his class, one far behind the hospital's best young doctors. But inside the simulation, he could keep learning, keep training, keep improving, hour after hour, day after day, until eventually, the gap between himself and everyone else began to disappear, and for the first time, that possibility no longer felt impossible. End of Chapter 13. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. # the surgical simulation system. # Chapter 14a. Circumflex Euros, the night shift. 3 days after Harold Benson's surgery, life inside St. Rowan Hospital returned to normal. At least as normal as a hospital could be. Patients continued arriving. Surgeries continued being scheduled. Doctors continued surviving on caffeine and determination. And residents continued discovering new ways to be exhausted. For Ethan, however, something had changed. People now recognized his name. Not everyone, not even most people, but enough. A few attendings knew who he was. Several senior residents remembered him. Even some nurses had started greeting him in the hallways. It wasn't fame, it wasn't status, but it was progress. On Thursday afternoon, the monthly resident schedule was released. The moment it appeared on the department board, residents crowded around it. Complaints immediately followed. As always, "No way. This has to be a mistake. Who made the schedule? Are they trying to kill us?" The reactions were so dramatic that Ethan almost laughed. Then he found his own name, and stopped laughing. Friday, 6:00 p.m. to 8:00 a.m. General surgery night shift. Beside him, Mason looked at the schedule, then looked at Ethan, then shook his head. "My condolences. It can't be that bad." Mason stared. "It can." Friday arrived far too quickly. By 6 o'clock that evening, most of the day shift staff were preparing to leave. The atmosphere inside the hospital slowly changed. The hallways became quieter. Departments reduced staffing. Lights dimmed in administrative areas. Yet the work never stopped. Night simply changed the rhythm. Ethan reported to the surgical station, where a senior resident named Clara Bennett was reviewing charts. Without looking up, she pointed toward an empty chair. "Sit." Ethan obeyed immediately. For the next 30 minutes, Clara reviewed patient information, current admissions, postoperative cases, potential complications, emergency consultations. The amount of information felt overwhelming, yet Clara handled everything effortlessly. Years of experience were obvious. When the briefing finally ended, Clara looked at him. "Tonight you'll learn something important." "What?" He closed a patient file. "Most surgery isn't performed inside operating rooms." Ethan frowned. That sounded wrong. Surgery literally happened inside operating rooms, didn't it? Apparently noticing his confusion, Clara continued. "Operations are important, but preventing complications, recognizing problems early, managing patients correctly, that's what keeps people alive." For some reason, those words stayed with him. The first half of the shift remained surprisingly calm. Several postoperative assessments, medication reviews, patient concerns, routine work, nothing dramatic, nothing exciting. Around midnight, Ethan even started believing Mason had exaggerated. Then room 5. 112 happened. A nurse hurried toward the station. "Room 5. 112. Immediately Clara stood. What's wrong? Post-operative patient. Severe abdominal pain. The atmosphere changed instantly. Both residents followed the nurse. Inside the room sat a man who had undergone intestinal surgery 2 days earlier. Sweat covered his forehead. His face looked pale. Very pale. Even Ethan immediately recognized something was wrong. The patient wasn't simply uncomfortable. He was deteriorating. Clara began assessing him immediately. Questions. Examination. Vital signs. Laboratory requests. Everything happened rapidly. Ethan assisted wherever possible. Then something familiar appeared. Case analysis available. Potential causes. Postoperative infection, a circumflex euros 44%. Internal bleeding, a circumflex euros 29%. Anastomotic leak, a circumflex euros 18%. Other, a circumflex euros 9%. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Anastomotic leak. A complication where a surgical connection between sections of intestine fails. Rare. Dangerous. Potentially life-threatening. The system wasn't giving answers. Only possibilities. But it was enough to guide his thinking. As additional information arrived, Ethan carefully reviewed the data. Fever. Elevated heart rate. Increasing abdominal tenderness. Something wasn't right. Very wrong. The more he analyzed the situation, the more concerned he became. Finally he spoke. Could this be a leak? The room became quiet. Clara looked at him. Several nurses stopped moving momentarily. The senior resident studied the patient again, then reviewed the chart. Another examination followed. More questions. More analysis. 10 minutes later, Clara picked up a phone. Call Dr. Reeves. The seriousness of her expression immediately told everyone everything. This was no longer routine. By 1:30 in the morning, the patient was heading toward emergency surgery. Tests had confirmed a serious postoperative complication, one that required immediate intervention. Had it remained unnoticed for several more hours, the outcome could have been disastrous. As the patient disappeared toward the operating suite, Clara finally looked at Ethan. You noticed it early. Ethan shrugged. I got lucky. No. Her answer came immediately. Luck doesn't recognize warning signs. For a moment neither spoke. Then Clara nodded once. A small gesture, yet somehow it felt important. The remainder of the shift passed quietly, at least compared to what had happened earlier. By sunrise, Ethan felt completely exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Night shifts were brutal, far worse than he had imagined. As he prepared to leave, a notification appeared. Special case contribution. Potential complication recognized. Reward. Clinical diagnosis +3. Patient management +2. Simulation hours +8. Department reputation increased. Department reputation? That was new. Very new. Ethan stared at the notification. Then toward the operating department. Somewhere upstairs, surgeons were still working. Saving a patient. Correcting a complication. Doing what surgeons did every day. For the first time, Ethan realized something. Being a great surgeon wasn't only about performing operations. It was about recognizing when someone needed one. And tonight, he had taken a small step toward understanding that difference. End of chapter 14. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 15a. Circumflex euros, the trauma chief. The story of room 5. 112 spread through the surgical department surprisingly quickly, not because Ethan had done something extraordinary, but because residents talked, nurses talked, attendings talked. Hospitals were like small cities. Information traveled fast, especially when it involved a junior resident correctly identifying a dangerous complication. Monday morning arrived. The surgical department felt busier than usual. Weekend admissions had filled several wards. Emergency surgeries had continued through the night. Patient charts seemed to multiply endlessly. As Ethan worked through his assignments, he noticed something unusual. Several senior residents now greeted him by name. Not many, only a few. Yet, it was different from before. Previously, he had been invisible. Now people remembered him. Around 10 o'clock, Clara approached the nurse's station carrying several charts. Dr. Reeves wants you. Ethan looked up immediately. Now? That was never a reassuring answer. 5 minutes later, Ethan stood outside the trauma surgery department. Unlike general surgery, the trauma floor felt different. More intense. More urgent. Patients arrived unexpectedly. Emergencies happened daily. Mistakes carried immediate consequences. Even the atmosphere felt heavier. After knocking, Ethan entered the office. Dr. Leonard Reeves sat behind a desk reviewing patient files. The trauma chief looked exactly the same as always. Calm, cold, impossible to read. For several moments he simply continued reading. The silence became uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Finally he spoke. How many hours do you study? Ethan blinked. The question wasn't what he expected. I'm not sure. Estimate. Ethan thought for a moment. 3 or 4 hours a day. That wasn't entirely the lie. The simulation definitely counted as studying, even if nobody else knew about it. Dr. Reeves nodded slowly, then opened another file. The patient in room 5. 112. Ethan immediately understood. Complication case. You recognize the warning signs. Partially. You recognize them. The trauma chief repeated the statement. Apparently he wasn't interested in false modesty. For a moment silence returned. Then Reeves asked another question. What kills most trauma patients? Ethan considered the answer carefully. Blood loss. Brain injuries. Organ damage. Several possibilities came to mind. Finally he answered. Hemorrhage. Dr. Reeves nodded. What kills most young doctors? Ethan frowned. That wasn't a medical question. After several seconds, he admitted defeat. I don't know. The trauma chief finally looked up. Overconfidence. The answer surprised him. Knowledge matters. Skill matters. Reeves closed the file. But overconfidence kills careers. His voice remained calm. Never assume you're smarter than the patient, the disease, or the operating room. For some reason, Those words felt important. Important enough to remember. Conversation ended shortly afterward. No praise. No compliments. No rewards. Just advice. Yet Ethan left the office feeling he had learned something valuable. That afternoon brought another surprise. The preliminary resident rankings had been updated. The second evaluation category had been included. Residents immediately rushed toward the board. Some looked excited. Others looked terrified. Competition was becoming serious. Ethan found his name, then looked again, to make sure he wasn't mistaken. Current surgical resident rankings. 1. Ryan Mercer. 2. Olivia Hart. 3. Daniel Ross. 4. Ethan Vale. 5. Jacob Turner. 4th place. He had climbed from 8th to 4th. The improvement wasn't huge, yet inside a competitive surgical department, every position mattered. Every position represented opportunity. Not bad. Ethan turned. Ryan stood beside him. The top-ranked resident studied the board. You've moved up quickly. Ethan smiled. So have you. Ryan looked toward his own name, then shrugged. I've been preparing for years. The answer sounded simple, yet Ethan understood exactly what it meant. Ryan wasn't talented because of luck. Ryan worked hard. Very hard. For the first time, Ethan stopped viewing him as a rival. Instead, he viewed him as a target. Someone worth chasing. Someone worth catching. Eventually, that night, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. A new notification immediately appeared. Department reputation increased. Current status. Recognized junior resident. Benefits unlocked. Advanced case library. Trauma department simulations. Meant or ship evaluation tracking. Ethan's eyes widened. Trauma simulations? That sounded useful. Very useful. Without hesitation, he selected the new option. The simulation world changed instantly. The familiar operating room disappeared. A trauma center appeared. Ambulances. Emergency bays. Critical patients. Controlled chaos. Everything looked larger than before. More difficult. More dangerous. A new screen appeared. Advanced simulation available. Mass casualty incident. Difficulty. Hard. Recommended rank. Top 10 resident. Reward. Major skill growth. Special achievement. Ethan stared at the challenge, then smiled. A month ago, he would have failed instantly. Now, he wasn't so sure. The gap between him and the department's best residents still existed, but every day, it grew slightly smaller. Every simulation, every patient, every lesson, every mistake, they all pushed him forward, and somewhere ahead, opportunities far greater than St. Rowan Hospital were waiting. The question was whether Ethan would be ready when they arrived. End of chapter 15. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 16. A. Circumflex euros. The cost of a mistake. The next few days passed quietly, at least by hospital standards. Patients recovered. Surgeries were completed. Residents continued chasing rankings. And Ethan continued dividing his life between St. Rowan Hospital and the surgical simulation system. On the surface, everything seemed to be going well. Too well. And hospitals had a habit of punishing complacency. Wednesday afternoon arrived with unusually heavy rain. Dark clouds covered Silvergate City. Inside the general surgery department, Ethan was updating patient records when a nurse hurried toward the station. Her expression immediately caught his attention. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Room 6, 107. The nurse looked directly at Clara. Post-operative patient. Blood pressure is dropping. The atmosphere changed instantly. Charts were abandoned. Conversations ended. Doctors moved. Ethan followed Clara toward the room. Inside, a man in his 50s lay in bed. 3 days earlier, he had undergone bowel surgery. At first glance, he looked stable. Then, Ethan noticed the signs. Pale skin, rapid breathing, elevated heart rate. Something wasn't right. Clara immediately began assessing the patient. Questions, examination, chart review. Everything happened quickly. The room filled with tension. For Ethan, it felt strangely familiar, almost identical to several simulation scenarios. Then the system activated. A blue screen appeared. Case analysis, possible conditions, postoperative bleeding, circumflex euros 51%, infection at circumflex euros 24%, pulmonary complication A, circumflex euros 13%, other is circumflex euros 12%. Normally, Ethan trusted the system, not blindly, but enough to take it seriously. Today would teach him an important lesson. The patient's blood pressure continued falling. Several nurses prepared emergency medications. An attending physician arrived moments later. Everyone began discussing possible causes. The evidence seemed to point toward bleeding. Even Ethan believed it. Then something unexpected happened. The attending paused, studied the chart again, then ordered additional tests. Run blood cultures. Clara looked surprised. So you're thinking infection? The attending nodded. Possibly. Several doctors exchanged uncertain looks. The symptoms overlapped. Bleeding, infection, both remained possible. For the next hour, everyone waited, and while they waited, Ethan felt increasingly uneasy. The system continued displaying the same conclusion. Postoperative bleeding, 51%, the highest probability. Yet something about the case bothered him. Finally, the test results arrived. The answer shocked everyone, including Ethan. Severe infection, not bleeding, not hemorrhage, infection. The patient had developed an aggressive postoperative infection that was causing septic shock. A life-threatening complication. Treatment began immediately. Antibiotics, fluids, critical care consultation. Fortunately, the diagnosis came early enough. The patient stabilized several hours later. The crisis passed, but Ethan remained unusually quiet. That evening, after most of the chaos ended, Clara found him sitting alone in the resident lounge. You look upset. Ethan hesitated, then spoke honestly. I thought it was bleeding. So did several doctors. The system thought it was bleeding too. The words nearly escaped before he stopped himself. System. He couldn't exactly explain that part. Clara sat across from him. For several moments neither spoke. Then she finally said, medicine isn't mathematics. Ethan looked up. Sometimes you'll have incomplete information. Sometimes symptoms overlap. Sometimes even experienced doctors get things wrong. She leaned back slightly. The goal isn't perfection. It's recognizing mistakes before they become disasters. The conversation stayed with him long afterward. That night, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. Immediately, a notification appeared. Case review available. Room 6, 107. Outcome analysis. Recommended. Without hesitation, Ethan selected it. The simulation environment appeared. A virtual copy of the patient. The same symptoms. The same charts. The same laboratory values. Everything identical. For the next 6 simulation hours, Ethan reviewed every detail, every symptom, every clue, every mistake, again and again and again. The system replayed the case repeatedly, showing different possibilities, different outcomes, different decision paths. Eventually, he noticed something. A small detail, a subtle laboratory abnormality, something he had overlooked, something that pointed toward infection. A notification appeared. Learning milestone achieved. Case understanding improved. Clinical diagnosis +2. Critical thinking +3. Special lesson learned. System recommendations are not absolute. Ethan stared at the final sentence, then smiled bitterly. Perhaps that was the most valuable lesson so far. The system wasn't magic. It wasn't perfect. And if he blindly followed it, one day someone could get hurt. The next morning, Ethan arrived at St. Rowan with a completely different mindset. The system was a tool. Nothing more, nothing less. A powerful tool, but still a tool. The responsibility would always belong to him, not the system, not the hospital, not anyone else. Him. As he entered the surgical department, another notice had been posted. Residents immediately crowded around it. Excitement filled the hallway. Ethan moved closer. Then his eyes widened. The title alone was enough to attract attention. St. Rowan Hospital. First Year Resident Technical Competition. Top 5 residents selected. Operating room training opportunity. The list of qualifying residents was posted beneath, and Ethan's name was on it. End of chapter 16. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 17a. Circumflexuros. The technical competition. The announcement shook the entire first-year resident group. Unlike written evaluations and patient assessments, technical competitions measured something every surgical resident cared about. Skill. Real skill. Not memorization. Not theory. Not exam scores. Hands on ability. The thing that separated surgeons from everyone else. By lunchtime, everyone in the department was discussing the competition. The rules were simple. 5 residents had qualified based on their previous evaluation scores. Each participant would complete a series of technical tasks. Suturing, knot tying, instrument handling, basic laparoscopic simulation. The highest ranked performer would receive direct operating room training opportunities. The kind of opportunities residents spend years chasing. The qualifying residents were Ryan Mercer, Olivia Hart, Daniel Ross, Jacob Turner, Ethan Vale. As soon as the list appeared, conversations started. Most predictions were identical. Ryan Mercer would win. The real question was who would finish second. No one mentioned Ethan. Not maliciously. They simply didn't expect him to compete with the others. That evening, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. The moment he arrived, a notification appeared. Competition preparation module available. Difficulty, intermediate. Training hours, 30. Objective, improve technical precision. Reward, skill advancement. Without hesitation, Ethan accepted. The simulation room transformed. Rows of surgical workstations appeared. Practice wounds, artificial tissue models, laparoscopic simulators, knot tying stations. The environment looked identical to a world-class surgical training center. For the next 12 simulation hours, Ethan trained relentlessly, again and again and again. Every knot had to be perfect. Every suture spacing had to be precise. Every movement was measured, evaluated, corrected. The system tolerated no shortcuts. At first, Ethan's performance looked average. Then gradually it improved. His hands moved more confidently. His movements became smoother, more efficient, more controlled. Hours later, a screen appeared. Training summary. Suturing +3. Instrument handling +2. Hand stability +2. Practical surgical skill +4. Overall evaluation 69. Ethan smiled. For the first time, his overall evaluation approached 70. Still far below elite surgeons, but far ahead of where he had started. Competition day arrived 2 days later. The surgical skills laboratory had been converted into an examination area. Several attending physicians sat at judging tables. Senior residents observed from the sides. Even Dr. Graham had appeared. The presence of the department chief immediately increased the pressure. One by one, participants entered. The first event was knot tying. A basic skill, yet one of the most important. 4 knots could lead to complications. Bleeding, wound separation, surgical failure. Simple didn't mean unimportant. Ryan performed first. His hands moved like a machine. Fast, accurate, efficient. Even Ethan felt impressed. The judges nodded repeatedly. Clearly, Ryan had set a difficult benchmark. Olivia followed, then Daniel, then Jacob. All performed well. All demonstrated strong technique. Competition was tighter than expected. Finally, Ethan's turn arrived. The room became quiet. Several residents watched curiously. They knew he had improved. They just didn't know how much. Ethan took a deep breath, then began. One knot, then another, then another. His movements felt natural. Not because he possessed exceptional talent, because he had practiced thousands of times. Inside the simulation, hour after hour, day after day, mistake after mistake. When he finished, the room remained silent. Several judges reviewed the results. One attending raised an eyebrow. Another nodded. A third wrote something on a score sheet. No one spoke, which somehow made Ethan even more nervous. The second event involved suturing, a simulated wound closure. Precision mattered. Consistency mattered. Every stitch would be evaluated. Again, Ethan performed. Carefully, methodically. No unnecessary speed. No flashy movements. Only solid fundamentals. The same fundamentals he had spent countless simulation hours mastering. As the final stitch was completed, Clara Bennett looked genuinely surprised. That alone felt like an achievement. The last event involved laparoscopic simulation, a basic exercise using specialized instruments. Unlike open surgery, laparoscopic procedures required doctors to operate while viewing a screen. The technique demanded exceptional coordination. Most first-year residents struggled, including Ethan. The moment the exercise began, he realized his weakness. His movements lacked the confidence displayed by Ryan. His efficiency was lower. His experience was limited. For the first time all day, he felt behind. When the competition finally ended, participants gathered near the waiting area. Nobody knew the results. The judges needed time, which only increased everyone's anxiety. Ryan sat quietly reviewing a patient chart. Olivia checked her phone. Daniel paced nervously. Jacob stared at the floor. Ethan drank coffee. A lot of coffee. Nearly an hour later, the judges returned. The room immediately became silent. Dr. Graham stepped forward. A score sheet rested in his hand. The results are finalized. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 5th place. A name was announced. Not Ethan. 4th place. Another name followed. Still not Ethan. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. Something unexpected was happening. Very unexpected. 3rd place. Jacob Turner. Several residents gasped. Jacob looked shocked. Apparently he expected a better result. Only 2 names remained. Ryan Mercer. Ethan Vale. For the first time, the room became truly silent, because nobody had expected that outcome. Not even Ethan. Dr. Graham glanced at the final page, then looked toward the participants. 2nd place. Ethan's hands tightened slightly. Ryan Mercer. The room exploded. Shock. Disbelief. Whispers. Confusion. Nobody had expected Ryan to lose. Nobody. Dr. Graham raised a hand. The room became quiet again. 1st place. He looked directly at Ethan. Ethan Vale. For a moment, Ethan simply stood there, unable to believe what he had heard, because for the first time since entering St. Rowan Hospital, he had beaten the best resident in his class. And somewhere inside the surgical simulation system, a new notification silently appeared. Major achievement unlocked. First department competition victory. Reward pending. End of chapter 17. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 18. A circumflex Euros the first assistant. The room remained silent for several seconds after the results were announced. No one had expected Ethan Vale to finish first. Not the residents. Not the senior doctors. Not even Ethan himself. For nearly a month, Ryan Mercer had been considered the strongest first-year resident in St. Rowan Hospital. Now, for the first time, someone had surpassed him. As residents slowly left the skills laboratory, conversations immediately erupted. Where did he come from? Wasn't he ranked 8th before? How did he beat Ryan? The questions spread rapidly. Ethan could practically hear them following him through the hallway. Fortunately, he had no intention of answering, because he couldn't. He certainly wasn't going to explain the surgical simulation system. To Ethan's surprise, Ryan caught up with him near the elevators. For a brief moment, he wondered if the other resident was upset. Instead, Ryan extended his hand. Congratulations. Ethan blinked, then shook it. Thanks. Ryan smiled slightly. You earned it. No jealousy, no resentment, no excuses. The response immediately increased Ethan's respect for him. Before leaving, Ryan paused. Just don't get comfortable. Ethan laughed. I wasn't planning to. Good. Then Ryan entered the elevator and disappeared. For the first time, Ethan felt something changing between them. They were rivals. Not exactly. They were competitors. Kind who pushed each other forward. The next morning, a new notice appeared on the department board. This time, nearly every surgical resident gathered around it. Even senior residents looked interested. Ethan moved closer. Then immediately, he understood why. General Surgery Department. Special Training Program. Selection Criteria. Technical Competition Top 3. Reward. Operating Room Assistant Opportunity. Selected residents. Ryan Mercer. Olivia Hart. Ethan Vale. Ethan stared at the announcement. Operating Room Assistant. Not Observer. Assistant. A completely different level of responsibility. While residents were allowed to observe surgeries regularly, assisting was far rarer, even if the role involved only minor tasks. The opportunity itself mattered. It meant trust. It meant recognition. It meant progress. Around noon, Ethan received further instructions. Report to Operating Room 9. Tomorrow, 6:30 a.m. No additional details were provided, which somehow made him even more nervous. That evening he entered the surgical simulation system immediately, after returning home. A new reward notification appeared. Major achievement reward. Competition victory confirmed. Rewards. Simulation hours plus 20. Practical surgical skill plus 5. Advanced surgical assistant module unlocked. Ethan's eyes widened. 20 simulation hours. That alone was valuable. The new module was even more exciting. Without hesitation, he selected it. The world around him transformed. The familiar training center disappeared. In its place appeared a modern operating room, larger than anything he had previously seen. More equipment, more personnel, more complexity. A notification appeared. Advanced surgical assistant training. Role. First assistant. Objective. Maintain surgical field. Manage instruments. Support lead surgeon. Prevent contamination. Difficulty. Advanced. For the first time since obtaining the system, Ethan realized something. Being an assistant wasn't easy. Far from it. The simulation began. Immediately. No warning. No preparation. A virtual surgeon extended a hand. Scalpel. Ethan froze. A fraction of a second too long. Simulation failed. Response delay. What? The simulation restarted. Again. The surgeon extended a hand. Forceps. This time Ethan reacted faster, but picked the wrong instrument. Simulation failed. Instrument error. Ethan stared in disbelief. This was brutal. For the next 10 simulation hours, failure became normal. Wrong instrument. Poor positioning. Contaminated field. Slow response. Mistake after mistake. Yet slowly, things improved. The system continued teaching, correcting, repeating, demanding perfection. By the end of the training session, Ethan finally completed his first successful simulation. The reward screen appeared immediately. Module complete. Assistant awareness plus 4. Instrument recognition plus 3. Operating room protocol plus 2. Practical surgical skill plus 2. New skill acquired. Basic surgical assistance. Ethan exhaled slowly. The training had been exhausting, yet he finally understood why experienced assistants were so valuable. A great assistant made surgery smoother, safer, faster. A poor assistant became a liability. The following morning arrived quickly. At 6:30 8:30 sharp, Ethan stood outside operating room 9, dressed in surgical scrubs, hands slightly sweaty, heart beating faster than normal. Several other residents waited nearby, including Ryan. The atmosphere felt tense. Everyone understood the significance of today. A nurse eventually appeared. Ryan Mercer. Ryan followed immediately. A few minutes later, Olivia's name was called. She disappeared through another operating room entrance. Only Ethan remained, waiting, watching, thinking. Then the final door opened. A familiar figure stepped out, tall, calm, cold, impossible to read. Dr. Leonard Reeves, Chief of Trauma Surgery. The moment Ethan saw him, a bad feeling appeared. The same feeling every resident experienced around Dr. Reeves. The trauma chief looked directly at him. Vale. Sir, you're with me. The hallway became silent. Several nearby residents immediately looked toward Ethan. Their expressions ranged from shock to sympathy, because everyone knew one thing. Being selected by Dr. Reeves was either a great opportunity or a complete disaster. Sometimes both. Without another word, Reeves turned and walked back toward the operating room. Ethan followed immediately. As the operating room doors slowly closed behind him, a notification appeared before his eyes. Special mission activated. First trauma surgery. Assistance. Difficulty. High. Failure consequences. Department reputation loss. Reward. Unknown. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt genuinely nervous, because this wasn't a simulation. This was real. And inside operating room 9, his biggest challenge so far was waiting. End of chapter 18. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. # the surgical simulation system. # chapter 19a. Circumflex Euros inside, operating room 9. The doors closed behind Ethan. For a moment, the outside world disappeared. The noise of the hospital, conversations, the crowded hallways, everything vanished. Only the operating room remained. Bright surgical lights illuminated the room. Monitors displayed patient vital signs. Nurses prepared instruments. An anesthesiologist reviewed medications. Every person had a role. Every movement had a purpose. Nobody wasted time. Nobody wasted words. Ethan immediately recognized something. This wasn't a scheduled training procedure. This was a real trauma surgery. The atmosphere was completely different from the operations he had previously observed. Faster, sharper, more intense. The patient was a man in his 30s, a construction worker. According to the chart, he had been involved in an industrial accident. Several heavy steel beams had collapsed. The impact caused significant abdominal injuries. Internal bleeding was suspected. Dr. Reeves reviewed the imaging studies one final time, then looked around the room. Let's begin. The operation started immediately. Unlike previous surgeries Ethan had observed, there was very little discussion. Everyone already knew what needed to be done. Time mattered. The patient was stable for now. The trauma patients could deteriorate rapidly. Ethan stood opposite Dr. Reeves. His role remained simple. Observe. Assist when instructed. Stay out of the way. Do not make mistakes. The surgery progressed smoothly during the first 30 minutes. The trauma team identified damaged tissue, controlled several bleeding vessels, carefully explored the abdominal cavity. Ethan focused entirely on the procedure. Every movement, every decision, every instruction. How the simulation hours suddenly felt worthwhile. For the first time, he could actually follow the operation. Not perfectly, but well enough to understand what was happening. Then the situation changed. A nurse suddenly spoke, blood pressure dropping. The monitor alarms activated. The room immediately became tense. Current pressure, 80/46. Dr. Reeves remained calm. Find the source. The surgical team immediately intensified their search. Somewhere inside the abdomen, bleeding continued. The problem was locating it. And quickly, Ethan watched carefully. The patient had already lost significant blood. If the bleeding wasn't controlled soon, the situation could become dangerous. Very dangerous. Several minutes passed. The source remained unclear. For the first time, Ethan noticed a small crease forming on Dr. Reeves' forehead. Not panic, concentration. Then something caught Ethan's attention. A specific area near the liver. A small accumulation of blood. Not large. Not obvious. Easy to overlook. The moment felt strangely familiar, because he had seen something similar before. Inside the simulation, the system remained silent. No notifications appeared. No helpful blue screens. Nothing. This wasn't a simulation. This was reality. The decision belonged entirely to him. Ethan hesitated. Should he speak or remain silent? Several senior doctors stood inside the room. People with years of experience. Who was he to interrupt? A first-year resident. A beginner. Then he remembered something Dr. Reeves had once said. Never assume. Never ignore. Never let fear make decisions. Ethan took a breath. Dr. Reeves. The room became quieter. Several people looked toward him. What? The trauma chief didn't even look up. Ethan pointed carefully. There. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Dr. Reeves examined the area. His eyes narrowed slightly. A second later he moved. Retractor. The assistant immediately complied. The field opened further. More blood appeared. And there it was. The source. A damaged vessel partially hidden beneath surrounding tissue. The room immediately accelerated. Additional instruments appeared. Suction. Clamps. Repairs. Control. Within minutes the bleeding stopped. Patient's blood pressure slowly began recovering. The monitor alarms faded. The danger passed. No one celebrated. No one relaxed. The surgery continued. Because trauma surgery wasn't finished until the patient survived. Nearly 2 hours later, the operation finally ended. The patient remained stable. The bleeding had been controlled. The injuries repaired. The outcome looked promising. As the team began cleaning up, Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. His scrubs felt damp with sweat. His legs ached. His mind felt exhausted. Then Dr. Reeves removed his gloves. For several moments he said nothing, which somehow felt worse. Finally, he looked toward Ethan. You saw it. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Silence followed. Several nurses quietly exchanged glances. Apparently, Everyone understood the significance of the conversation. Dr. Reeves nodded once. Just once. Good. Then he left. That was all. One word. Yet somehow it carried more weight than any compliment Ethan had ever received. Back in the locker room, Ethan finally sat down. His heart still raced. The entire experience felt unreal. A month ago, he would never have noticed the bleeding. A month ago, he wouldn't even have understood the procedure. A month ago, he would have stood frozen. Now things were different. Not because he was talented. Not because he was special. Because he had practiced, failed, learned, repeated, again and again. That evening after returning home, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. The moment he arrived, a golden notification appeared. Unlike the usual blue screens, this one was different. Major achievement completed. First real trauma contribution. Evaluation. Excellent. Rewards granted. Clinical diagnosis +5. Trauma recognition +5. Simulation hours +25. Department reputation increased. Special reward unlocked. Trauma surgery path. Ethan's eyes widened. A completely new path. The system had never offered something like that before. Slowly, a new section appeared on the interface. Available advanced departments. General surgery. Trauma surgery. Orthopedic surgery locked. Cardiothoracic surgery locked. Neurosurgery locked. Vascular surgery locked. For the first time, Ethan realized the system was much larger than he had imagined. Much larger. And somewhere ahead, opportunities far greater than St. Rowan Hospital were waiting. The journey had only just begun. End of Chapter 19. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 20. Circumflex Euros. The monthly review. The days following the trauma surgery passed surprisingly quickly. For Ethan, life settled into a familiar rhythm. Morning rounds, patient assessments, chart reviews, night shifts, simulation training, then repeat, again and again. The schedule was exhausting, but for the first time since arriving at St. Rowan Hospital, he felt like he belonged. Not as a student, not as an observer, as a resident, a real doctor in training. The patient from the trauma surgery recovered well. Word spread throughout the department that Dr. Reeves had personally acknowledged Ethan's contribution. No official announcement was made. No special recognition was given. Yet inside a hospital, news traveled fast, especially when it involved the trauma chief. Several attendings began paying closer attention to him. Some asked more difficult questions during rounds. Others invited him to observe procedures. Even senior residents seemed slightly more willing to teach. The change was subtle, but Ethan noticed it. One Monday morning, a hospital-wide email appeared. Almost every resident checked it immediately. The subject line alone attracted attention. Monthly surgical department review. Attendance mandatory. Mason groaned the moment he read it. Bad news. Ethan looked up. It's a meeting. It's never just a meeting. Apparently, experience had made Mason cynical. 2 days later, the entire surgical department gathered inside a large conference hall. More than 100 people filled the room. Attendings, residents, department leaders, senior nurses, administrative staff. For the first time, Ethan truly appreciated the size of St. Rowan Hospital. The surgical department alone felt enormous. At the front of the room sat several familiar faces. Dr. Graham, Dr. Reeves, department chiefs, deputy chiefs, senior attendings, the leadership responsible for guiding the hospital. The meeting began with statistics, surgical volume, complication rates, patient satisfaction, department performance, research achievements. Everything was reviewed. Everything was measured. Hospitals, Ethan realized, operated almost like corporations. Performance mattered. Results mattered. Numbers mattered. Then the discussion shifted toward residents. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Everyone paid closer attention. A large screen appeared. First, Year Resident Performance Rankings. Month 1. The list slowly appeared. 1. Ryan Mercer. 2. Ethan Vale. 3. Olivia Hart. 4. Daniel Ross. 5. Jacob Turner. A murmur spread through the room. Several residents looked surprised. Some looked impressed. Others looked annoyed. Ethan stared at the ranking. Second place. Not first, but far higher than he ever imagined when he arrived at St. Rowan. A month earlier, he had simply hoped not to fail. Now he ranked near the top. Then something unexpected happened. Dr. Graham stood. The room immediately became silent. Rankings are useful. His voice remained calm, professional, controlled. They help measure progress. Nobody moved. They also create arrogance. The room became even quieter. Several residents lowered their eyes. Everyone knew people who cared too much about rankings. Dr. Graham continued, a patient does not care whether you rank first. A patient cares whether you make the correct decision. Ethan immediately remembered room 6. 107. The infection case. The system had suggested one possibility. Reality had proven another. Dr. Graham wasn't criticizing ambition. He was reminding everyone of something important. Medicine was not a game. The meeting continued for another hour, then finally ended. Most residents immediately returned to work. Hospitals never stopped. Meetings changed nothing about that. As Ethan prepared to leave, a voice stopped him. Vale. He turned. Dr. Graham stood nearby. Walk with me. Several residents immediately looked jealous. Others looked curious, because being singled out by the department chief rarely happened. They walked through the surgical floor together. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Dr. Graham stopped near a large observation window overlooking several operating rooms. Do you know why most residents fail? Ethan thought carefully. Knowledge? No. Skill? No. The older surgeon folded his arms. They stop improving. The answer surprised him. Medicine changes. Techniques change. Technology changes. Dr. Graham looked toward the operating rooms. The moment a doctor believes they know enough. His voice became quieter. That's the moment they begin falling behind. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the chief surgeon handed Ethan a folder. Read this. Ethan opened it. His eyes widened immediately. Regional Surgical Resident Exchange Program. Participating hospitals. Westbridge Medical Center. St. Victoria Hospital. Royal Royal Medical Institute. Sent. Rowan Community Hospital. Only 5 residents would be selected. 5. From the entire hospital. Ethan slowly looked up. Dr. Graham's expression remained unreadable. Applications open next month. Then he walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone, holding the folder. Westbridge Medical Center. The hospital he once dreamed of joining. The hospital that rejected him after graduation, for the first time since arriving at St. Rowan. Ethan realized something. His world was beginning to expand. Beyond one department. Beyond one hospital. Beyond one city. That night, the moment he entered the surgical simulation system, a new notification appeared. Major story event detected. Regional exchange program. Preparation path unlocked. New competitors incoming. New competitors? Ethan stared at the message, then smiled, because if the system was warning him about future competition, that probably meant things were finally about to become interesting. End of chapter 20. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 21a. Circumflex Euros the application. For the next several days, the regional exchange program became the most discussed topic in St. Rowan Hospital. Residents talked about it in hallways, during lunch, inside operating rooms, even during night shifts. The reason was simple. Opportunities like this were rare, very rare. The program allowed selected residents to train temporarily at some of the best hospitals in the Kingdom of Valoria. Hospitals most young doctors only dreamed about. Westbridge Medical Center, St. Victoria Hospital, Royal Medical Institute. Places where groundbreaking procedures were performed every week. Places where future department chiefs and surgical leaders were trained. For Ethan, the program carried special meaning, because Westbridge Medical Center was the hospital that had rejected him after graduation. At the time, he hadn't even received an interview. His application had disappeared into a pile of thousands. Nothing more. Now things were different, at least slightly. One afternoon, Ethan sat in the resident lounge reviewing patient charts when Mason dropped into the chair across from him. You applying? Ethan didn't need to ask what he meant. The exchange program? Mason nodded. Of course. Then yes. Mason grinned. Good. Why? Because if you don't apply, Ryan probably wins by default. Before Ethan could answer, Ryan walked into the room carrying a stack of files. The timing was almost suspicious. Mason pointed. See? Ryan glanced between them. What? Nothing. The top-ranked resident narrowed his eyes, then wisely decided not to ask further. For a moment, all 3 worked quietly, reviewing charts, completing paperwork, trying to survive residency. Eventually Ryan spoke. I'm applying. Ethan wasn't surprised. Neither was Mason. You'd be crazy not to. Ryan nodded. Exactly. Then he looked toward Ethan. So should you. The statement wasn't arrogant. It wasn't challenging. It sounded more like a fact. And strangely enough, that made it more motivating. Later that evening, Ethan finally opened the application packet. The requirements were intimidating. Academic evaluations, clinical performance, technical skill assessments, supervisor recommendations, personal interviews. Only 5 residents would be selected from St. Rowan. 5 out of more than 100 eligible candidates. The odds weren't good, yet Ethan couldn't stop smiling, because a month ago he wouldn't have qualified at all. Now he had a chance. A real chance. That night he entered the surgical simulation system. The moment he arrived, several notifications appeared. Major goal registered. Regional exchange program. Recommended preparation time. 120 simulation hours. Estimated competitiveness. Very high. Suggested training focus. Clinical reasoning. Advanced. Surgical skills. Emergency decision making. Ethan frowned. 120 hours. The system clearly wasn't expecting an easy competition. A new module appeared. One he had never seen before. Elite Hospital Assessment Program. Status. Unlocked. Difficulty. Advanced. Without hesitation, he selected it. The simulation environment changed immediately. The familiar St. Rowan training rooms disappeared. In their place appeared a massive medical complex. Modern architecture. Advanced operating suites. Specialized surgical centers. Research laboratories. Everything looked far beyond St. Rowan's capabilities. A notification appeared. Simulation environment. Westbridge Medical Center. Virtual training copy. Ethan's eyes widened. For the first time, he was seeing the inside of the hospital that had once rejected him, even if it was only a simulation. Doctors moved through the hallways. Residents discussed complex cases. Large digital displays showed surgical schedules. Everything felt faster, sharper, more competitive. System voice finally spoke. Objective: survive 1 day as a Westbridge resident. Difficulty: high. Ethan laughed. That didn't sound encouraging. The simulation started immediately. Case presentations, emergency consultations, complex patient reviews, rapid-fire questioning from attendings. The pressure was relentless. Within 30 minutes, Ethan failed. Spectacularly. Simulation failed. Insufficient clinical knowledge. The result appeared without mercy. Ethan stared at the screen, then laughed again, this time slightly bitterly, because for the first time since activating the system, he truly understood the gap. The gap between St. Rowan and elite hospitals. The gap between a good resident and a great one. The gap between where he was now and where he wanted to be. The realization didn't discourage him. If anything, it motivated him more, because now he had a target, a mountain worth climbing. The following morning, Ethan submitted his application. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just determination. As he placed the final document into the submission box, a familiar notification appeared. Major career path confirmed. Regional exchange candidate. New competitors detected. Preparation phase beginning. For a moment, Ethan simply stared at the screen, then toward the operating rooms beyond the hallway. Somewhere out there were residents from Westbridge, St. Victoria, Royal Medical Institute, people smarter than him, more experienced than him, more talented than him, and for the first time in his life, Ethan was preparing to compete with them. End of chapter 21. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 22. Circumflex zeros the interview list. A week passed after the exchange program applications were submitted. For most residents, life returned to normal, at least as normal as residency could be. Morning rounds, patient assessments, emergency calls, night shifts. Repeat. The hospital never slowed down. Neither did the competition. For Ethan, however, something felt different. The exchange program remained in the back of his mind. Every day, every shift, every simulation session, the opportunity represented something larger than a temporary training placement. It represented recognition, proof that he belonged in the same conversation as residents from elite hospitals. On Tuesday morning, the surgical department felt unusually energetic. Groups of residents gathered near the central station. Whispers spread through the hallways. Even nurses seemed curious. Something was happening. Ethan discovered the reason moments later. A notice had appeared on the department board. Regional exchange program. Interview candidates. The list had been posted. Residents crowded around the board. Some looked excited. Others looked nervous. A few looked devastated before they had even finished reading. Ethan slowly stepped forward. His eyes moved down the page, one name at a time. Ryan Mercer, Olivia Hart, Daniel Ross, Jacob Turner, Tina Euros, Ethan Vale. For several seconds he simply stared. Interview candidate. He had made the shortlist. Only 12 names remained. 12 candidates. 5 final positions. Competition had officially entered its next stage. A hand landed on his shoulder. Mason, congratulations. Ethan smiled. Thanks. You know what this means, right? More pressure? Exactly. Both laughed. Unfortunately, Mason wasn't wrong. Making the interview list only increased expectations. Now failure would feel far worse. Later that afternoon, Ethan received additional information. The interview process would be conducted by a selection committee, department chiefs, senior surgeons, hospital administrators, representatives from participating institutions. That final detail immediately caught his attention. Representatives from elite hospitals, meaning people from Westbridge Medical Center might be present. The same hospital that had rejected him. The thought made him strangely determined. That evening, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. The moment he arrived, a new notification appeared. Interview preparation module unlocked. Difficulty, advanced. Estimated training hours, 40. Objective, professional communication, clinical reasoning, ethical decision-making, leadership assessment. Ethan blinked. Leadership? The system immediately answered. Elite hospitals evaluate more than knowledge. Fair point. Without hesitation, he entered the module. The simulation environment changed. Instead of an operating room, Ethan found himself inside a conference hall. A long table stood before him. Several virtual interviewers sat opposite him. The atmosphere felt intimidating, even though none of it was real. The first question appeared immediately. A senior surgeon asks, "Why do you want to become a surgeon?" Ethan opened his mouth, then paused, because it wasn't actually a simple question. The simulation ended 3 minutes later. Failed. Answer too generic. Ethan stared at the screen. What? The system remained merciless. Restarting interview. The next attempt lasted 6 minutes. Failed. Insufficient specificity. The third attempt lasted 9. Failed. Weak leadership example. By the 7th failure, Ethan was ready to argue with the system. By the 10th failure, he finally understood the lesson. Knowledge wasn't enough. Technical skill wasn't enough. Elite institutions wanted something else. Purpose, communication, vision, the ability to inspire confidence. For the first time, Ethan realized that great surgeons weren't only skilled. They were leaders. People patients trusted. People teams followed. People hospitals relied upon. Hours passed. The simulation became increasingly difficult. Ethical scenarios, patient communication, emergency decision-making, conflict resolution. Each challenge tested something different. When the session finally ended, a reward screen appeared. Interview skills improved. Professional communication +4. Leadership +2. Clinical confidence +3. Overall evaluation 74. Ethan smiled. 74. His highest score yet. The next morning brought another surprise. Dr. Reeves personally requested his presence. Again, the trauma chief's office looked exactly as it always did. Minimal decoration. Patient files. Medical journals. Silence. Lots of silence. Dr. Reeves reviewed paperwork for several minutes before finally speaking. You're on the interview list. Yes, sir. The trauma chief nodded. Good. The single word somehow felt more meaningful than most speeches. Then Reeves handed him a file. Ethan opened it. His eyes widened. The file contained details about a regional trauma case competition. A competition involving residents from multiple hospitals, including Westbridge, including St. Victoria, including the Royal Medical Institute. For a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. This year's exchange candidates will be observed there. Dr. Reeves finally looked up. Think of it as an unofficial addition. The realization hit immediately. The interview wasn't the real challenge. Competition was. For the first time, Ethan would stand on the same stage as residents from the kingdom's best hospitals. No rankings, no reputation, no advantages, just skill. As he left the office, a familiar notification appeared before his eyes. Major event incoming. Regional Trauma Challenge. Countdown. 21 days. Expected difficulty. Very high. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt genuinely excited, because the next step of his journey was finally approaching. End of chapter 22. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 23. Circumflex Euro's new rivals. After learning about the regional trauma challenge, Ethan's daily routine changed again. The pressure increased. The urgency increased. Even the simulation system seemed to recognize the importance of the upcoming event. For the first time since arriving at St. Rowan Hospital, Ethan wasn't competing only against residents from his own hospital. He was preparing to face residents from across the kingdom. The best of the best. 3 weeks sounded like a long time. It wasn't. Not in medicine. Not in surgery. Not when every day disappeared beneath patient charts, ward rounds, consultations, and emergency calls. The first week passed quickly. Then the second. Before Ethan realized it, Only 10 days remained. One afternoon, the hospital administration finally released details about the competition. A meeting was scheduled for all selected candidates. Conference room was packed. Residents from multiple departments attended. Emergency medicine, trauma surgery, general surgery, critical care. Everyone waited quietly. A presentation screen illuminated. The event logo appeared. The Lauria Regional Trauma Challenge. Competition would be hosted at Westbridge Medical Center, the largest teaching hospital in the kingdom. A hospital containing over 3,000 beds, hundreds of attending physicians, thousands of healthcare workers, and some of the most advanced surgical facilities in Valoria. For Ethan, hearing the name still felt strange. Westbridge, the place that once rejected him. Now he would walk through its doors as a competitor. The presentation continued. Participating hospitals: Westbridge Medical Center, St. Victoria Hospital, Royal Medical Institute, East Harbor Medical Center, Central University Hospital, St. Rowan Community Hospital. Several residents exchanged nervous looks. The names alone were intimidating. Every institution on the list carried prestige, history, reputation. Then another slide appeared. Each hospital will send 3 candidates. Only 3. The room became quiet. Very quiet. Ethan immediately understood the implication. Not everyone on the interview list would be selected. Competition still existed, even within St. Rowan. As the meeting ended, residents slowly left the room. Many looked thoughtful. Others looked worried. A few looked defeated. Ethan was halfway down the hallway when someone called his name. Vale. He turned. Ryan Mercer stood nearby. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ryan handed him a folder. What's this? Competition data. Ethan opened it. Inside were profiles. Previous winners. Past competition results. Evaluation criteria. Detailed information. Ethan looked surprised. You collected all this? Ryan nodded. Preparation matters. That sounded exactly like something Ryan would say. The 2 residents walked together toward the cafeteria. A rare occurrence. Normally they only spoke briefly. Today was different. You elected? Ethan asked. Ryan considered the question. Probably. That's confident. It's realistic. The answer made Ethan laugh. For the first time he noticed something. Ryan wasn't arrogant. He simply viewed everything objectively, including himself. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes. Competition history, trauma medicine, future careers. For the first time, Ethan realized how similar they actually were. Different personalities, different backgrounds, but similar goals. That evening, Ethan entered the surgical simulation system. Immediately, a new module appeared. Regional Trauma Challenge Preparation. Difficulty: Expert. Estimated hours: 80. New opponent profiles added. Opponent profiles? That was new. Very new. Curious, Ethan selected the option. A list appeared. Lena Carter, St. Victoria Hospital, ranked #1 resident. Marcus Hale, Royal Medical Institute, National Surgical Scholar. Noah Bennett, Westbridge Medical Center, previous Trauma Challenge champion. Ethan stared. The system had created simulations based on actual competitors, or at least competitors similar to them. He selected Noah Bennett, the previous champion. The simulation immediately changed. A trauma assessment scenario appeared. The challenge began. For the next 2 hours, Ethan competed directly against a virtual version of Noah. Same patient, same information, same time limit. The result wasn't encouraging. Simulation result: Noah Bennett, 97. Ethan Vale, 78. Difference: 19 points. Ethan stared at the score, then laughed. That's brutal. The system didn't disagree. Additional analysis. Current success probability. Regional Trauma Challenge, 14%. Only 14%. Most people would feel discouraged. Ethan felt motivated, because now he knew the truth. Competition wasn't close. Not yet. The gap still existed. A large gap, but unlike before. He could see it, measure it, attack it. One simulation at a time. The following morning brought another surprise. Final St. Rowan selection list was posted. Residents crowded around immediately. Heartbeats accelerated. Careers waited on a single sheet of paper. Ethan pushed through the crowd, searching for names. Then he found them. Ryan Mercer, Ethan Vale, Olivia Hart, selected. For several moments, Ethan simply stared. He had done it. Not the final victory. Not the exchange program. Not the competition. Just the first step. But for the young doctor who had once been rejected by every elite hospital in the kingdom, it felt significant. Very significant. Because in 2 weeks, he would walk into Westbridge Medical Center. Not as an applicant. Not as an outsider. But as a representative of St. Rowan Hospital. And for the first time, the real competition was about to begin. End of chapter 23. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 24a. Circumflex Euro's Westbridge Medical Center. For the next 2 weeks, Ethan's life became even more demanding. Every spare moment was spent preparing for the Regional Trauma Challenge. During the day, he worked at St. Rowan Hospital. At night, he trained inside the surgical simulation system. Sleep became a luxury. Coffee became a necessity. And exhaustion became normal. Competition was approaching. Fast. Very fast. One evening, Ethan completed another simulation against the virtual version of Noah Bennett. The result appeared immediately. Simulation result: Noah Bennett, 95. Ethan Vale, 91. Difference: 4 points. Ethan smiled. The gap was shrinking, slowly, painfully, but it was shrinking. A new notification appeared. Success probability. Regional Trauma Challenge. Previous: 14%. Current: 41%. Still not great, but far better than before. The following Monday arrived. Travel day. For the first time since joining St. Rowan Hospital, Ethan would leave Silvergate City. The selected residents gathered outside the hospital before sunrise. Ryan Mercer, Olivia Hart, and Ethan. A hospital shuttle waited nearby. Several department representatives had come to see them off. Even Mason appeared, though mostly to complain about being awake this early. Don't embarrass us. That was his farewell speech. Ryan nodded seriously. Olivia rolled her eyes. Ethan laughed. A few minutes later, Dr. Graham arrived. The department chief looked exactly as composed as always. You are representing St. Rowan. His gaze moved across across the 3 residents. Your performance reflects this hospital. Nobody spoke. Good luck. Coming from Dr. Graham, that was practically an emotional speech. The journey lasted several hours. As the city skyline slowly appeared outside the shuttle windows, Ethan immediately recognized it. Capital City, the largest city in the kingdom, home to the nation's most prestigious hospitals, medical universities, research centers, and elite specialists. The closer they traveled toward the city center, the larger everything became. Taller buildings, busier streets, more people, more ambition. Then Ethan finally saw it. Westbridge Medical Center. For several moments, nobody inside the shuttle spoke. The hospital looked more like a medical city than a hospital. Massive glass towers stretched into the sky. Several connected buildings occupied an entire district. Emergency helicopters rested on rooftop landing pads. Hundreds of people moved through the entrances. Patients, doctors, researchers, students, visitors. The scale was overwhelming. Rowan suddenly felt small. Very small. The shuttle finally stopped. The resident stepped outside. For a few seconds, Ethan simply stared. A year ago, he had dreamed of working here. Now he was standing in front of it. The group entered through the main entrance. Immediately, the differences became obvious. Advanced digital systems, large specialty centers, dedicated trauma wings, robotic surgery departments, research laboratories. Everything looked modern, efficient, elite. As they followed a coordinator through the hospital, Ethan noticed something else. The residents here seemed different, confident, extremely confident. Some discussed complex surgical cases while walking. Others reviewed research papers. Several wore identification badges, filled with awards and academic achievements. For the first time in months, Ethan felt like an outsider again. A familiar blue notification appeared. Elite environment detected. Stress level increased. Performance penalty possible. Ethan almost laughed. Even the system noticed. Eventually, the coordinator led them into a conference hall. Representatives from every hospital had already arrived. Dozens of residents filled the room. The atmosphere felt competitive, almost like athletes before a championship. Then Ethan noticed something. A large leaderboard displayed participant information. Names, hospitals, academic rankings, previous achievements. One name immediately stood out. Noah Bennett, Westbridge Medical Center, National Trauma Assessment Champion, National Surgical Scholar. Research publications, 8. Ethan stared. 8 publications? Most residents struggled to publish one. Another name appeared. Lena Carter, St. Victoria Hospital, top resident, National Emergency Medicine Award. Then another, Marcus Hale, Royal Medical Institute, Surgical Skills, Champion. Every profile looked ridiculous. For the first time, Ethan understood what Dr. Graham meant. Competition outside St. Rowan was different, completely different. As participants continued arriving, someone suddenly stopped in front of him. A young man, tall, confident, wearing a Westbridge identification badge. His eyes moved toward Ethan's name tag. St. Rowan? The tone wasn't insulting, just surprised. Yes. The resident smiled slightly. Interesting. Then he extended a hand. Noah Bennett. For a brief moment, Ethan simply stared. The reigning champion. The resident he had spent dozens of simulation hours trying to defeat. Standing directly in front of him. Ethan shook his hand. Ethan Vale. Noah nodded. I've never seen St. Rowan reach this stage before. Then he smiled. I hope you're good. Before Ethan could answer, Noah walked away. The challenge hadn't even started, yet the pressure had already arrived. That night, standing inside his hotel room overlooking the city, Ethan looked at the glowing skyline beyond the window. Tomorrow the competition would begin. Tomorrow he would face the best residents in the kingdom. Tomorrow he would discover how far he still had to climb. A final system notification appeared before his eyes. Major competition event. Regional Trauma Challenge. Begins in 12 hours. Ethan slowly smiled. For the first time since obtaining the surgical simulation system, he felt truly excited, because the next chapter of his journey was about to begin. End of chapter 24. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 25 at Circumflex Euros the first round. The next morning, Ethan woke before his alarm. For several seconds, he stared at the hotel ceiling. Then everything came rushing back. Westbridge Medical Center. The Regional Trauma Challenge. The best residents in the kingdom. Today was the first round. After a quick breakfast, participants gathered inside the competition center. Nearly 50 residents filled the hall. Some reviewed notes. Others discussed cases. A few sat quietly, conserving energy. A large screen illuminated the room. Competition director stepped forward. Welcome to the Regional Trauma Challenge. The room became silent. The first round will test clinical reasoning. Immediately, several residents straightened. Participants will evaluate trauma cases, identify injuries, determine treatment priorities, and recommend management plans. Ethan immediately understood. This wasn't about memorization. It was about thinking. Each resident was assigned a private workstation. A virtual patient file appeared on the screen. Case 1. 26-year old male, motorcycle accident, chest trauma, low blood pressure, difficulty breathing. Ethan began reading. Hours inside the simulation immediately paid off. Instead of panicking, he worked methodically. Airway, breathing, circulation, primary survey, secondary survey, possible injuries. First case ended, then another began, then another. By the 5th case, sweat covered Ethan's forehead. The questions were difficult, very difficult. One patient suffered multiple fractures. Another had internal bleeding. A third developed complications during treatment. Every decision affected the final score. 3 hours later, the first round ended. The results would be announced after lunch. Participants slowly exited the hall. The atmosphere was tense. Nobody knew how they had performed. Ryan appeared beside Ethan. How was it? Difficult. Ryan nodded. Good. What? If it was difficult for you, it was difficult for everyone. That logic actually made sense. Several hours later, Everyone gathered inside the auditorium. The first round rankings appeared. 1. Noah Bennett at circumflex Euros 98. 2. Marcus Hale at circumflex Euros 97. 3. Lena Carter at circumflex Euros 96. No surprises. Then Ethan searched further. 8. Ethan Vale at circumflex Euros 91. His eyes widened. Top 10. Among the best trauma residents in the kingdom. A month ago, he would never have imagined it. The room erupted with discussion. Several participants looked toward Ethan. Apparently St. Rowan's representative ranking 8th had surprised people. A familiar notification appeared. Competition progress. Current rank, 8. Participants remaining, 48. Qualification status, safe. For the first time that day, Ethan relaxed slightly. First hurdle was cleared. Unfortunately, the second round would begin tomorrow, and according to the schedule, it was far more difficult. End of chapter 25. Chapter 26a. Circumflex Euros, the simulation battlefield. The second round began at 7 in the morning. Unlike the previous day, the atmosphere felt completely different. The number of participants had been reduced. Only the top 24 advanced. Competition was becoming serious. The director stepped onto the stage. Round 2. The giant screen behind him changed. Advanced trauma simulation. Several residents immediately frowned. This wasn't a written assessment. This wasn't theory. This was practical decision making. Each participant would enter an advanced simulation center. Inside, they would manage trauma patients in real time. Doctors, nurses, equipment, everything would react to their decisions. For Ethan, it felt suspiciously familiar, because it sounded almost identical to what the surgical simulation system had been forcing him to do for months. One by one, participants entered simulation rooms. When Ethan's turn arrived, the doors closed behind him. Immediately, alarm sounded. Incoming trauma patient. A nurse rushed forward. Male, 30. 2 years old. Construction accident. Unstable vitals. The simulation had begun. Ethan moved instantly. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Airway assessment. Breathing evaluation. Blood pressure. Pulse. Neurological status. The actions felt natural, because he had already failed this scenario dozens of times inside the system. Several evaluators observed from behind glass. At first, they watched casually. Then their attention increased. Ethan wasn't moving like a typical first-year resident. He remained calm, focused, organized. Patient suddenly deteriorated. Blood pressure dropped. Oxygen levels fell. Several warning signs appeared simultaneously. Many participants panicked during moments like this. Ethan didn't. He prioritized, delegated, analyzed, acted. The simulation continued for nearly 40 minutes. One complication after another, one crisis after another. Finally, the scenario ended. Simulation complete. For the first time, Ethan noticed the evaluators discussing something among themselves. One even reviewed his score twice. That couldn't be bad, right? Several hours later, participants gathered once again. The rankings appeared. 1. Noah Bennett. 2. Marcus Hale. 3. Ethan Vale. Silence. Then whispers exploded throughout the room. Third place. Ethan had jumped from 8th to 3rd. Even Ryan looked shocked. Olivia stared openly. Several Westbridge residents immediately began discussing him. Who's Ethan Vale? St. Rowan. No way. Check the scores. The attention felt strange. For the first time, Ethan wasn't being ignored. He wasn't the outsider standing quietly in the corner. People were noticing him. Across the room, Noah Bennett studied the rankings, then slowly looked toward Ethan. Instead of surprise, he smiled. Not mockingly, not arrogantly. The smile of someone who had finally found a competitor worth paying attention to. That evening, Ethan returned to his hotel exhausted. Yet before he could rest, the system activated. Major achievement. Regional Trauma Challenge. Top 3 ranking achieved. Rewards granted. Clinical Reasoning +5. Emergency Response +4. Simulation Hours +30. Special Notice. Elite Talent Recognition activated. Elite Talent Recognition? Before Ethan could investigate further, another notification appeared. This one made his heartbeat accelerate. Final round tomorrow. Expected difficulty. Extreme. Ethan stared at the message, then looked out the hotel window toward the lights of Westbridge Medical Center. Tomorrow would decide everything. The championship, the exchange program, his reputation, his future opportunities. And for the first time since arriving at Westbridge, Ethan genuinely believed he could win. End of chapter 26. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 27a. Circumflex Euros. The final round. The final day of the Regional Trauma Challenge arrived. The atmosphere inside Westbridge Medical Center felt completely different. The casual conversations from the first day had disappeared. The uncertainty from the second day was gone. Only the strongest competitors remained. Only 12 residents had reached the final round, and every one of them wanted to win. Ethan stood near the auditorium entrance reviewing the competition schedule. The final round would combine everything. Clinical reasoning, emergency management, leadership, team coordination, technical decision making. Unlike previous rounds, participants would work with a team, a real medical team, or rather, a simulated one. The challenge wasn't simply solving a medical problem. It was leading others through it. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. Didn't expect to see you here. Ethan turned. Noah Bennett stood nearby. Coffee in one hand, competition badge around his neck. Most people didn't, Ethan replied. Noah laughed. Their answer. For several moments they stood quietly. Then Noah spoke again. People are talking about you. That's never good. It is when you're winning. Ethan shook his head. I'm not winning. Noah glanced toward the ranking board. Not yet. Then he walked away. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Yet, it somehow increased the pressure, because Noah clearly viewed him as a genuine competitor now. A few minutes later, the competition began. The final scenario appeared on a massive screen. Mass casualty incident. High-speed train derailment. Multiple critical patients. Limited resources. The entire auditorium became silent. This wasn't one patient, or two. It was dozens. The type of disaster hospitals trained for but rarely encountered. Each finalist entered a simulation command center. Large monitors surrounded them. Patient data streamed continuously. Virtual doctors and nurses waited for instructions. Timer started. Chaos exploded immediately. Patients arrived one after another. Head injuries. chest trauma, internal bleeding, crushed limbs, burns, shock. The challenge wasn't saving everyone. That was impossible. The challenge was prioritization, determining who needed immediate care, who could wait, who required surgery, who required transfer. A single mistake could cost multiple lives. Ethan's heart raced, but his mind remained calm, because he had seen something similar before, inside the surgical simulation system. Not the exact scenario, but enough to recognize patterns, enough to avoid panic. 1 hour passed, then another. The simulation became increasingly brutal. New patients arrived, resources decreased, complications appeared, doctors reported problems, equipment failed. Every participant struggled, even Noah, even Marcus. Finally, the simulation ended. Everyone sat silently, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained. For several minutes nobody spoke. Then the results appeared. Third place, Marcus Hale, Royal Medical Institute. Applause filled the room. Marcus smiled and nodded respectfully. Then the screen changed. Second place, Noah Bennett, Westbridge Medical Center. The audience erupted. Westbridge residents immediately cheered. Yet Noah remained calm, because only one name remained. The entire auditorium became silent. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. No way, surely not. Then the final result appeared. First place, Ethan Vale, St. Rowan Community Hospital. For several seconds, nobody moved. The result felt impossible. A resident from St. Rowan, a hospital most elite institutions barely noticed, had defeated every major teaching hospital in the kingdom. Then applause exploded. Ryan stood first, clapping. Olivia followed. Soon the entire room joined. Ethan remained frozen, not because of the trophy, not because of the recognition, because for the first time in his life, he had proven he belonged. End of chapter 27. Chapter 28a. Circumflex Euros, a new beginning. The championship ceremony ended nearly 2 hours later. Photographs, awards, interviews, congratulations. For Ethan, the entire experience felt surreal. A month ago, he was simply a first-year resident trying to survive night shifts. Now he was standing on a stage beside the best young doctors in the kingdom. Life changed quickly, very quickly. The following morning, Ethan received an official invitation. Regional Exchange Program. Congratulations. You have been selected. The message contained signatures from multiple institutions. Westbridge Medical Center, St. Victoria Hospital, Royal Medical Institute. The exchange program was no longer a possibility. It was reality. For the first time since graduating medical school, Ethan felt genuine excitement about the future. He returned to Silvergate later that week. When the hospital shuttle arrived at St. Rowan, dozens of staff members were waiting. Apparently the news had traveled ahead of them. Residents gathered near the entrance. Nurses applauded. Even several attending physicians appeared. Mason pushed through the crowd first. You actually won. Apparently. I was hoping you'd finish second. Ethan laughed. Why? So your ego wouldn't become unbearable. Comment immediately. Earned laughter from everyone nearby. For the first time, Ethan felt completely relaxed. Home. St. Rowan still looked exactly the same, yet somehow everything felt different. Several days later, the monthly department meeting took place. This time, however, Ethan wasn't sitting in the middle rows. Dr. Graham personally called him forward. The entire surgical department watched. Achievement deserves recognition. The chief surgeon rarely gave speeches, which made everyone pay attention. Mr. Vale represented this hospital exceptionally well. Simple words, yet they carried enormous weight. For a resident, public recognition from a department chief was invaluable. After the meeting ended, Ethan returned to his normal duties. Patient rounds, charts, assessments, because despite everything, he was still a first-year resident, still learning, still improving, still making mistakes. That evening he entered the surgical simulation system. A golden notification appeared. Major story milestone completed. Regional Trauma Challenge champion. Rewards granted. Simulation hours plus 100. Advanced surgical pathways unlocked. New feature available. Mentor system. Ethan frowned. Mentor system. The interface expanded. Available mentors. Professor Adrian Cross. Trauma surgery. Professor Eleanor Hart. Cardiothoracic surgery. Professor Victor Kane. Neurosurgery. Locked. Ethan stared. The system was evolving again, growing larger, providing new opportunities. Then another notification appeared. Future event detected. Exchange program begins in 30 days. Ethan smiled. Competition was over. The trophy was won. The recognition achieved. But deep down, he knew the truth. The championship wasn't the destination. It was the beginning. Because in 30 days, Ethan Vale would leave St. Rowan temporarily and enter the world of elite medicine. A world filled with genius residents, legendary surgeons, future rivals, and people who would eventually change his life forever, including one young surgeon he had not met yet, a surgeon whose arrival would alter the course of his career, and much more. End of chapter 28. Welcome to Meet Patel Audiobooks. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more chapters. The surgical simulation system. Chapter 29a. Circumflex Euros exchange program orientation. The next month passed faster than Ethan expected. Winning the regional trauma challenge had brought recognition, but it had also brought responsibility. More attendings knew his name. More senior doctors paid attention to his work, and more people expected results. At first, Ethan enjoyed the attention. Then he realized something important. Recognition didn't make residency easier. It made mistakes more visible. Every patient assessment was examined more carefully. Every presentation received additional questions. Every recommendation faced greater scrutiny. For the first time, Ethan understood why talented doctors often felt pressure. The higher you climb, the more people watched. 30 days later, the regional exchange program officially began. Representatives from multiple hospitals gathered inside a conference center located near the Capital Medical District. Residents from all participating institutions filled the room. Westbridge Medical Center, St. Victoria Hospital, Royal Medical Institute, East Harbor Medical Center, Central University Hospital, and several others. More than 60 residents had been selected, the best young doctors from across the kingdom. As Ethan entered the auditorium, he immediately felt the difference. The atmosphere wasn't competitive. Not openly. It was worse. Everyone was evaluating everyone else. Medical school achievements, research publications, competition results, hospital rankings, future career prospects. The entire room felt like a gathering of future department chiefs. "You're staring." Ethan turned. Ryan Mercer stood beside him. "I'm observing." Ryan nodded. "That's a nicer way of saying it." Both laughed. Moments later, the orientation began. A representative from Westbridge stepped onto the stage. "For the next 6 months, you will rotate through different institutions." A slide appeared. Trauma surgery, general surgery, emergency medicine, critical care, research division. Each resident would experience multiple departments, multiple hospitals, multiple mentors. The goal was simple: expose talented young doctors to elite medical environments. Then another slide appeared. Performance rankings will be updated monthly. The room immediately became quieter. Of course there were rankings. There were always rankings. Ethan exchanged a glance with Ryan. Neither looked surprised. After orientation ended, residents received or assignments. One by one, names appeared on large screens. Finally, Ethan found his mentor, Professor Adrian Cross. Trauma surgery, Westbridge Medical Center. The name felt familiar. Then he remembered. Inside the system, Professor Adrian Cross was one of the advanced mentors. The realization immediately caught his attention. Could the system somehow know future events? The thought remained in the back of his mind as the day ended. Because tomorrow, he would finally begin working inside Westbridge Medical Center. Not as a visitor, not as a competitor, as a resident. End of chapter 29. Chapter 30. Circumflex Euros Professor Adrian Cross. Westbridge Medical Center looked even larger from the inside. The hospital never seemed to sleep. Residents rushed through hallways. Attendings discussed cases. Trauma alerts echoed through speakers. Research teams moved between departments. Everything felt faster than St. Rowan. Not necessarily better, just faster. Ethan reported to the trauma surgery department at 6:30 in the morning. A coordinator escorted him toward a conference room. Nearly 20 residents were already waiting. Most came from prestigious institutions. Several wore badges displaying research awards. Others had national competition titles. The atmosphere felt intimidating. Then the door opened. Silence immediately filled the room. A tall man entered. Mid-40s, sharp features, calm expression. Professor Adrian Cross, one of the most respected trauma surgeons in the kingdom, the man who led Westbridge's trauma division. Without introducing himself, he began speaking. Trauma surgery is not heroic. The room became silent. Movies lie. Several residents blinked. Television lies. Nobody spoke. Cross folded his arms. Most trauma surgery involves preparation, organization, discipline. His gaze moved across the room. People who chase glory rarely survive here. The introduction lasted less than 2 minutes. Yet Ethan immediately understood why the man had such a reputation. Every word carried weight. The meeting continued. Assignments were distributed. Rotation scheduled. Responsibilities explained. Then Professor Cross suddenly stopped. His eyes settled on Ethan. St. Rowan. The room immediately turned. Every resident looked toward him. Ethan stood. "Yes, Professor." Cross nodded. "The Trauma Challenge champion." Whispers spread instantly. Several residents clearly recognized the title. Others looked surprised. Professor Cross continued. "I reviewed your competition recordings." Ethan wasn't sure whether that was good or bad. The older surgeon studied him for several seconds. Interesting decision making. Then he moved on. That was all. No praise. No criticism. Nothing else. Yet Ethan somehow felt relieved. At least he wasn't being ignored. The rest of the morning passed quickly. Patient consultations, trauma reviews, case discussions. The complexity shocked him. Many cases involved injuries he had rarely encountered at St. Rowan. Multiple organ trauma, severe vascular injuries, complex chest trauma. The learning curve felt enormous. By late afternoon, Ethan's head hurt, and then disaster arrived. The trauma alert echoed through the department. Multiple casualties. High-speed highway collision. The atmosphere changed instantly. Doctors began moving. Nurses prepared trauma bays. Residents rushed toward emergency receiving areas. Ethan followed. The moment he entered the trauma unit, he froze. 6 ambulances, multiple critical patients, dozens of medical personnel, controlled chaos everywhere. This wasn't St. Rowan. This was Westbridge, and the scale was completely different. Professor Cross stood in the center of the room issuing orders. Calm, focused, unshaken. For the first time, Ethan truly understood what elite medicine looked like. A familiar notification appeared before his eyes. Major arc activated. Westbridge rotation. Difficulty very high. New rivals detected. Future romance route available. Status locked. Ethan stared, then immediately ignored the final line, because at that moment, a critical patient was arriving, and the next stage of his journey had officially begun. End of chapter 30.